as you can imagine, trying to think about how we want this organization to look in the next few years, having him help us sort of have a better understanding, how do we look relative to industry? When you think about someone that's had experience in Tampa, you think about someone who oversaw baseball operations for Boston, it's a pretty unique resume. And to be able to have someone like that join us, I think is going to be a huge asset for us as we try to understand, really, where are we?
That was John Mozeliak at the Cardinals winter warm-up with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex out today. He'll be back in on Monday. This weekend for the Cardinals will be better known as the Chaim Bloom Bowl. You're going to be hearing about it all weekend long. Sunday, the Cardinals will be playing on Roku, which is apparently a thing for Major League Baseball now. And during that quote-unquote national broadcast, in which they're using local broadcasters, similar to what they used to do with Peacock, but it's very much not the same deal as Peacock. No.
Are we going to have to wake up Jim?
Probably. This is going to be much different than what it was previously. I'm sure they'll be talking about Chaim Bloom a lot because he is somebody that is in the backdrop of this series. He's now a part of the Cardinals organization in a special advisory role. Nobody really knows what that means, but our basic understanding is he's doing a bunch of stuff behind the scenes to try to help the Cardinals out, especially when it comes to their pitching development side of things. He is the man that, for the most part, put together the current version of the Red Sox that you're going to see on the field this weekend. And Tanner, I think if I was putting the odds together today, if Circa Sports, if we were able to get them to put together some odds for us on who the next Cardinals president of baseball operations will be, I think the current favorite would be Chaim Bloom. And I especially felt that way after hearing Bill DeWitt Jr. at Cardinals winter warm-up talking about what it was like to be able to hire him in this capacity.
I immediately thought, we could probably use someone like that who's been with a small market, big market, very smart guy to help see what's going on with our organization. And interestingly, Mo thought the same thing. The world changes, and it's helpful to get the perspective for somebody who's been with different organizations.
T-Bone, text line at 314-399-9646. That's the Air Comfort Service text line. The YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. That is off and running with the graveyard over there. How would you feel if Chaim Bloom, who had a very underwhelming tenure in Boston, but did put together the pitching staff that is currently leading the major leagues in ERA this season. He was a big part of helping to develop that system. They had a top 5 farm system in Major League Baseball in Boston when he was fired this past offseason. How would you feel if that was the next choice to head the Cardinals baseball operations?
I wouldn't be excited about it, really. I think Chaim Bloom's resume from Boston was not all that impressive. And look, I understand now that it is hindsight, and after he's been fired, that the pitching is starting to develop behind him. But I wonder how much of that was, the guys that he drafted. Yes, that is credit to him and his development system. But then also the kind of change that they've had since they brought in the former big leaguer, I think Bailey's his name, if I remember correctly, their pitching coach. And they've basically said, fastballs, no more. Be damned with the fastball. We're throwing breaking balls only. I don't think his resume is that impressive. And I understand, hey, look, he was in a small market. He was with a big market. And, yeah, that's kind of what I described, Wednesday, when we kind of talked a little bit about what we would want from the next POBO. I just didn't find his decision-making in Boston all that impressive. And, look, I go back to some of the deadline inactivity, in which one deadline he kind of just stayed put, and the other he kind of did some buying and did some selling. But I was not all that impressed, and he whiffed on some free agent signings. And, look, a lot of those were smaller deals, but his big whiff was the Trevor Story deal that he committed, and that one's been a total disaster for him. I'm not going to hold the Mookie Betts trade against him because that was ownership's doing. He didn't keep Bogarts, which I think was probably a plus in the long run than it was a negative. But I don't find him to be a compelling hire. I feel like he would just be a blah hire to me. I would not find it as okay, I see the direction the Cardinals are going, because I don't know what Chaim Bloom really believes in. I think he believes in more of faceless baseball than he does in let's get some stars in here and let's try and win. I feel like he's the guy that is a 80 to 85 win team builder. And if you want to say that's what the Cardinals have been doing under the Mozeliak era, I'd say that's what I've been pushing it back against in the Mozeliak era.
What do you want to win with? Because if you want to win with pitching, Chaim Bloom's your guy. I don't know that that's a super exciting brand of baseball. What you saw from him in Tampa Bay and the way that they operate there, and that's different. Don't get me wrong, it's different than basically any other market in all of Major League Baseball. they're going to trade their stars the first moment when they start making money because they are never going to be spenders. And he operated really well within the constraints of what took place in Tampa Bay. A lot of those people, though, go on. But Friedman's the exception to the Tampa Bay rule. A lot of those guys end up going on, taking on operations elsewhere, and they get stuck in the middle when they go somewhere else, where, yeah, they're going to spend a little bit, kind of like what they did in Boston, where, okay, we'll dip our toe in the water with Trevor Story. We'll get like a Kenley Jansen. We'll make a couple of moves kind of on the periphery of what you would typically expect in the free agent market, but we're not going out there and giving Xander Bogaerts that massive deal. We're not going to keep Mookie Betts long-term. Those are the kinds of decisions that they make in Boston or previously in Tampa Bay. But they're really good at developing pitching. You look at that rotation right now, even the bullpen that exists in Boston, most of those guys were players that were identified and developed while Chaim Bloom was in charge. They are a very young team. That is something that it appears he prioritizes. They got younger over his tenure with the Boston Red Sox. So if that's the direction that you would like to see the Cardinals go, I'm not sure you could hire a more qualified person for this job than Chaim Bloom. It would be hard to do so. I think what makes him different, T-Bone, than a lot of the people that we would be talking about as candidates for this job, if and when it is to be filled, is that we have a track record on Chaim Bloom. One of the worst things, and I'm not getting political here, I promise, but just think as an example. One of the worst things you can have as somebody that is running for president is a long track record in Senate, a long track record as a governor, because now you have actual policies that people can criticize and people know exactly what it is that you stand for, which we can discuss whether or not that's something that should be a problem, but it is for many candidates that run for president, because now I can have attack ads that go specifically at this, and this. That's what's happening right now with Chaim Bloom. He has that track record in Boston. Many of the candidates do not. They'll be assistants with Milwaukee or with Tampa Bay or with the Dodgers or with the Astros or with Baltimore. They'll be in really good organizations, and they can cling on to the good things that have taken place, and they don't have to be somebody that puts their name on the bottom line for any of the negatives that are associated with that organization. That's how it works when you're not the man that's making all of the decisions. Chaim Bloom has to be one of the people that answers, the person, honestly, that answers for trading Mookie Betts for a terrible return. That's the biggest stain on his resume. But to answer the question directly, do I think it would be an inspired choice? I do. I don't necessarily love the way that he team builds. I'm not sure that you're going to find a more qualified candidate for this job in St. Louis than Chaim Bloom, though. I think it was a smart hire when they made it, and given their lack of pitching throughout the entirety of this system right now, and it's a problem for them, I think he is the exact type of candidate that they both will be and should be looking for.
I would much rather prefer, probably because of what you said, the way he builds teams, him to be more of like an assistant or a special advisor than him to be the lead guy doing it. Because I think as a special assistant, he could be a guy that could help kind of push you in the right direction of how you want to draft and develop through your system, which is clearly a problem for the St. Louis Cardinals. But in terms of like his roster construction, the way he built some of those teams in Boston, look, I think some of that was on ownership. Like, that's what makes it so tough to grade him in Boston, because Boston wasn't operating like a big market team. They tried to become big market Rays, and it failed spectacularly while he was at the helm. But the way he constructed some teams in the way that he operated in terms of free agency and the deadline, I just don't know if I want him being the guy that's in charge of everything, over sweeping the St. Louis Cardinals. And honestly, I don't think Cardinals fans would end up liking it. I think right now it would be, oh, it changed with the POBO. Good, Mo's gone.
Are they winning?
Well, that's based on Boston. I would say no. You know, he finished last twice. And look, you can say, again, there are so many difficult things to read into from being in St. Louis and not watching a ton of Boston Red Sox baseball. Part of the reason was because they sucked. But I don't think fans would like the way that he operates, because it is a lot of faceless baseball. Look at those rosters. He cut payroll for them. And look, again, that's part of ownership. But it was a lot of like, hey, there are not a lot of superstars once you got rid of Bogaerts. It's Rafael Devers and a cast of misfit toys that we hope we can kind of bring in and fix. And I don't think Cardinals fans would really enjoy that, honestly. I think if it wins, yeah, you're right. But I would say that for any POBO that comes in here and does any style.
Ultimately, that's what you're graded on.
I think
do you win?
People
do you
enjoy
succeed?
Winning baseball more when stars are attached to it, and I don't know if he would bring those guys in.
I agree, but I think if you have guys that are stars internal, and this is where I think the Cardinals would operate differently than what the Red Sox did. I think the Cardinals would have signed Mookie Betts long term. I do. Because they value the legacy player. Mookie Betts has won a World Series there. And they said, go off your merry way, enjoy your time in La La Land out in LA. I don't understand why or how they decided to come to that conclusion, but that's what they decided. I don't think Bill DeWitt Jr. would have done the same thing. We've seen it with Yachty. We've seen it with, to a lesser degree, Waino. Like, we did not end up seeing that with Albert Pujols. And that was the one time where they said, we just can't bring this guy back on a legacy contract. So maybe that would have been the similarity there with what we saw in Mookie Betts in Boston. But the other guys that they're letting walk, like J.D. Martinez, the Cardinals would have re-signed J.D. Martinez. The Cardinals would have re-signed Xander Bogaerts. They would have just dealt with the consequences later on, because that's what happens. They take these legacy players, keep them internal, and deal with what it means later on. I think Chaim Bloom would have to operate differently here in St. Louis than he did in Boston. But what he does very well, now not all these guys were his draft picks. Brian Bayo, he was somebody that they acquired in 2017 prior to Chaim Bloom operating there. He was not the guy that ended up acquiring him. Same thing for Cutter Crawford, if I'm not mistaken, on my timeline there. Nick Pivetta was part of what he brought in. He made a trade for Nick Pivetta. Tanner Houck prior to him. But what he did was he developed those guys. Some of the Cardinals minor league pitchers this year are performing better than what they did previous to Chaim Bloom being a part of the organization. I don't think that is by mistake. I think you're already seeing some of his fingerprints on the minor league system. I think he is having a bigger hand in that development process right now than what we all expected prior to this season. So if he's somebody that can come in, improve the development of the pitching within the minor league system, and he's able to help with some of the processes, I think he helped with them overhauling this bullpen in the offseason, for example. I think that is a guy that I would be interested in hiring as the long-term answer here in St. Louis. I do understand, though, there are legitimate blemishes on his resume, things that you can absolutely question. But there's going to be no candidate that we can look at and say to ourselves, yeah, I feel really great about that, other than like Theo Epstein. And that comes with its own set of, okay, for the next 3 years, you're going to be terrible. Is there a guy, T-Bone, that you think in the back of your mind right now where you're like, hey, go hire him, because there's nothing that I disagree with when it comes to his baseball philosophy? Because my guess is there probably isn't somebody that fits into that criteria for you right now.
Yeah, right now, without doing like extensive research into the market, I would say no. But I would find like Kim Ning more intriguing than a hire of Chaim Bloom, because I saw her have success in Miami. Now, granted, that's a small market team, but and look, this is probably more of a
very, very small sample size.
Yeah, and this is probably more of a tinfoil for me as well, of like part of the reason that she wanted out was because she got pushed out because they brought in someone to be ahead of her. But also I think she wanted to spend more money to go out and get a team, and ownership wouldn't do it. And I get it's a small sample size, but I saw her and Skip work well together. And if you were to bring in Skip as the next manager, I think you just bring in that Miami front office, essentially. Then you bring in Kim Ning to try and help things out. But otherwise, like top of my mind, I can't think of anybody else outside the organization that, like, to your point, everybody has some blemishes. But for me, Chaim Bloom is very concerning based on what I saw with the Major League roster.
Cardinals back in action tonight. They take on the Red Sox this weekend. Chaim Bloom's former team against his current team here in St. Louis with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we're going to talk to Rob Bradford. He's the host of the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast, but he's located up in Boston. He covers the Red Sox for WEEI up there. Want to get his thoughts on Chaim Bloom, what went wrong for him in Boston, and whether or not he thinks he would have success in his second act as the president of baseball operations elsewhere. We'll get into that with Rob Bradford and ask him about Tyler O'Neill and his success that he's had so far this year up with the Red Sox. Which of these former Cardinals would you most want to add to the current version of the Cardinals? Talk about that next. Give you the four options here on 101 ESPN.
Tyler O'Neill did not strike out a lot the first month of the season. Has not hit a home run in the month of May either. This would be a wonderful time to do it. There it is. Swing and a drive, and there it goes. Right past the light tower. We're tied 3-3. Well, that's got to feel sweet for Tyler O'Neill. First home run this month, give him 10 for the season.
That's what it sounded like as the Boston Red Sox getting much-needed production from Tyler O'Neill earlier this week. He had gone on a bit of a skid. He is striking out about 35% of the time again this year, T-Bone. Not hitting for a ton of average, but the power's there. He has 10 home runs so far on the season. And I wanted to ask you, I want to ask the audience as well at 314-399-9646, if you could add one of the following former Cardinals to this Cardinals team, so just for the 2024 season, which one would you want to add? There are 4 options here for you. I'm not going to Sandy Alcantara, Zach Gallen. We've talked enough about them. I'm not talking about Randy Rosarena, who's been terrible so far this season as well. Of these 4, who would you choose? Jordan Hicks, who's been fantastic so far this year for the San Francisco Giants. Tyler O'Neill, 10 home runs already this year from the Boston Red Sox.
We lost that trade.
Marcell Ozuna, who's top 3 in all of Major League Baseball in OPS so far this year, also has double-digit home runs. Or Austin Gomber, who shockingly has like a 3.5 ERA on the season. Now, if you look a little further into the numbers, none of it feels real. It seems like regression is definitely coming Austin Gomber's way sooner rather than later, but he is a guy that you know can at least go out there and eat innings for you, and he's been very good so far this season. So out of those 4, T-Bone, who would you most want to add to the 2024 Cardinals? Hicks, O'Neill, Ozuna, or Gomber?
I can't believe I'm saying this because I think he was one of the problems in the locker room last year that the Cardinals referred to. In fact, I probably know he was since he couldn't play on turf. I would add Tyler O'Neill back to this roster because he's been awesome for the Boston Red Sox. I mean, a 924 OPS, the 10 home runs, as you mentioned, slugging percentage above 550. I know I'm getting Gold Glove defense in left. I'm going to have a guy that can be a power source in the middle of my lineup that is also drawing walks and getting on base. I know he's not hitting for a ton of average, but 256 is solid for Tyler O'Neill. I think what you're seeing right now is Tyler O'Neill back to 2021 Tyler O'Neill, and that guy hit in the middle of your order and received MVP votes, finishing top 10. So I would add that guy to the order because you could sandwich him in the middle there. When Contreras was healthy, you'd have a 1-2 punch again instead of like right now where you don't have anything with the Contreras injury. O'Neill would be a guy that could currently potentially carry the St. Louis Cardinals offense. And the reason I didn't go with Ozuna is because you have these older pillars on the corners in Goldie and Arenado. It's less DH days for him, which Cardinals have actually avoided a lot of this year. Yeah. But he can't play anywhere in the field. Ozuna can't. So he loses some value in my mind, even though his bat's been awesome. And I would much rather have that DH spot to put like a Gorman or a Burleson or a Paul Goldschmidt or Arenado.
That's worked out well so far.
Well, to be fair, none of the offenses worked out well in my defense. But O'Neill would be a Gold Glover in left field, and you could have Donovan at second base and move Gorman to that DH slot or onto the bench. So I would say Tyler O'Neill.
You know what would be really nice for this team right now?
All 4 of them?
A guy that hits for average, gets on base, and hits for power. Marcell Ozuna is batting .330 with a .405 on base percentage, and he has led Major League Baseball so far this year with 12 home runs. And oh, by the way, he's driving in runs. When Tyler O'Neill hits homers so far this year, now some of this is because his team's not very good in front of him. That's totally valid. I'm going to put that on the front end. Tyler O'Neill has 10 home runs this year, and he has driven in 16. Think about how hard that is to accomplish, T-Bone. He has 10 home runs and 16 RBI, which means if he is not hitting a home run, chances are he's not driving anybody in. The same cannot be said for Marcell Ozuna, because Marcell Ozuna this year with 12 home runs has 41 ribbies, 41 RBI through the first 40 games of the season for Marcell Ozuna. Again, I understand the context is very important here. One of them plays on arguably the best offense in the sport. The other plays on a very bad offense. So that's important context here. But my answer is without question, adding Marcell Ozuna to the middle of the order would be the best thing for this team. A lot of people will probably say add Jordan Hicks. Fair, I understand why you would go that way. My pushback would be, and the same thing kind of exists for Tyler O'Neill, I don't believe Tyler O'Neill will be healthy the rest of the year. I just don't believe it. I don't think he's going to play 140 games this year. I think he's going to play closer to 100. Marcell Ozuna has proven an ability to be durable. Now, his shoulder might not work, but he's going to be on the field.
I would hope so, considering he's Czech's position DH.
He's going to be there for you. He's going to play in your lineup basically every day. There's going to come a point in time this year where the Giants are going to have to shut down Jordan Hicks because of the innings. We know how these teams operate. They're not going to let him throw 150 innings this year because it's too many relative to what he's done in previous seasons. So if the Cardinals had him as a part of their rotation right now, they'd probably have to shut him down at some point, whether that's midseason or at the end. And we know they have no alternatives. So I can't go to a guy that's not going to be expected to give me 30 starts. I can't go to Tyler O'Neill, who I can't expect to go out there for 140 games. I got to go with Marcell Ozuna, who's been one of the best pure hitters in Major League Baseball this year.
Yeah, the only reason I go with O'Neill is because I think he fits into what the Cardinals are trying to do, which is remain good defensively while also trying to get offensive production. And I understand, look, Ozuna, you don't have to worry about playing him because he's going to be at the DH spot.
Right.
But I think it allows you to continue to keep some of your other bats in the lineup as well. But yeah, I'm with you. It's not on the pitching side of things, especially for Jordan Hicks, because where the Cardinals are right now, where I think we can fairly call it an innings deficit with that 5 spot in the rotation with Liberatore kind of starting to stretch back out as a starter, Hicks would solve that, and he'd be really good in that spot. But to your point, it's just kicking the can down the road. At some point, you're going to get right back to where you were, to where he's not available because of his innings limit. And I just don't buy what Austin Gomber is in Colorado because of what you said. His underlying numbers aren't show that there's probably going to be regression to the norm, especially for Austin Gomber and in Colorado. But Tyler O'Neill's the one for me because he provides everything. He's a 5-tool player. And maybe it's just me, but I value a guy that can play in the field more than I value a designated hitter in Marcell Ozuna.
I did ask this on Twitter as well. If you could pluck one of the following former Cardinals from their current team and put them onto this Cardinals team for just the rest of the 2024 season, who would it be? 51% of the about 600 votes thus far were for Jordan Hicks. Jordan Hicks got the majority of the votes, which is interesting to me. Marcell Ozuna was second at 31%, Tyler O'Neill third with 16% of the vote, and Austin Gomber, my poor guy, 2% of the vote would go with Austin Gomber.
I'm shocked he got 2%.
I am too. I'm pretty surprised that there's that many people that would go with him. I do really wonder what this Cardinals team would be. Like, if we set everything else aside, just if Tyler O'Neill had been here for the first, 40 games of the year, and he produced for the Cardinals what he has produced so far this year for Boston, I wonder how much changes about where we're at right now for the Cardinals. I think they win at least a few more games because the home run power is what this team has so desperately been needing. And it's not like the one concern that I would have with Ozuna, I would be a little worried about how he would fit into this lineup without the other great players around him, because we saw that here and it was fine, but it wasn't great. And some of that was shoulder related. I get that. He's in the context of an outstanding lineup around him. O'Neill is not. O'Neill is producing despite what is around him right now, and that would still be the case here in St. Louis. He might even have a better quote-unquote lineup around him here. If he was here, where do you think the Cardinals are at currently?
I think they have a couple more wins. Like, they're probably at 21 wins. I think they're probably 21-22, or maybe 22-21. I don't think a ton changes. I don't think you're looking at a team that's all of a sudden like the Milwaukee Brewers, where they are 9 games above 500 and fighting for the crown of the NL Central, because just nobody else around the lineup would be hitting. And to your point on Ozuna, nobody else would probably be on base for him to drive in. So
sure.
I don't think they would be significantly better, but I do think there would be a couple wins that would be added on because you would now be adding slug to your lineup. So I would say they'd probably be closer to 500. They probably would be a 500 team if they had that, but I don't think it's anything that's significantly changed to where it is, hey, this team's all of a sudden in first place, because this roster, as we're seeing currently constructed, just has way too many flaws on it currently and not enough guys hitting in it, even if you added one more offensive piece.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, we'll get into those coming up here in just a little bit. But next, Rob Bradford covers the Red Sox for WEEI up in Boston. I want to ask him about what he's seen from Tyler O'Neill, the success that he's had thus far up in Boston. Are they buying into this in Boston? And what was his perspective of Chaim Bloom and his tenure up with the Red Sox? Is that something that was his fault? Was it on the organization? Does he believe Chaim Bloom could have success elsewhere if he gets another opportunity at as the president of baseball operations? We'll talk about all of that, so much more with Rob Bradford of WEEI next year on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals were off last night. They're back in action today as they kick off a series here at home against the Red Sox. It'll be Kyle Gibson getting the first of this series with the Red Sox. First pitch will be at 7:15 tonight from Busch Stadium. And tonight on 101 ESPN, we'll have Game 6 between the Bruins and the Panthers. The Panthers can eliminate the Bruins tonight with a win. Pre-game coverage on 101 ESPN starting at 5:30. I'm Grant Francis. Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Tyler O'Neill back in town tonight against the St. Louis Cardinals. He'll be with the Boston Red Sox. He has 10 home runs already so far this season. We're breaking it all down with Rob Bradford via the 101 ESPN hotline. He covers the Red Sox for WEEI up in Boston. He's also one of the co-hosts of the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast, and you can follow him on Twitter at Bradfo, Bradfo. Rob, we appreciate the time, man. How you doing today?
I couldn't be any better. The big Tyler O'Neill return. I love it.
Yeah,
Let's go.
we're not looking forward to it quite as much as you are, I would imagine. I'm no fraud, Rob. I was more than ready to move on from the Tyler O'Neill experience. It had run its course here in St. Louis. He had one miraculous season, but otherwise, the injuries had really started to pile up. He was almost never available, and even when he wasn't producing. What's gone right for him so far this year in Boston from your perspective?
Well, first off, I think he might be just a change of scenery guy. I mean, to begin with. And he started off so well. You could see it in spring training. He hit the ground running when the season started, was one of the best hitters in baseball. But I will say this, and I think that a lot of people in St. Louis are probably looking at his overall numbers and like, oh, wow, Tyler O'Neill, all these home runs and pretty good average and good OPS and everything else like that. But in the last few weeks, has not been good, and it's really been the problem. And I like Tyler getting a chance to know him a little bit, but I worry a little bit about he ran into Rafael Devers on Patriots Day, which is a Monday morning game here in Boston in April, and he had a concussion. He was out with a concussion, and you guys probably have seen this before. Concussions are a tricky thing. He comes back, and he's hit a couple home runs. But if you look at the amount of strikeouts that he's had in that time that he's come back and how things have dipped, it hasn't been pretty. Now, he's an enormous part of this Red Sox team. I mean, there's no question about it, and he's earned that right off of what he did earlier in the year. But I think people in Boston are looking at it right now and like, hey, you know what? I hope this isn't a lingering thing because let's be honest, guys. I mean, we've seen this happen before with concussions, and you just hope that it's a slump and not a physical related thing.
Rob, I want to go to the Boston Red Sox pitching because we've been talking about pitching for the last year and a half here in St. Louis. What has led their pitching to go from where their starting rotation had an ERA that was 22nd in baseball last year to first coming into this series?
Well, I mean, everyone will yell and scream about Andrew Bailey coming in. Andrew Bailey, obviously, the former pitching coach of the Giants, and he comes in and he's now changed everything. Craig Breslow's the new president of baseball, or chief baseball officer. We have to have a completely different title.
Very different.
He's not a POBO, but a chief baseball officer. But Breslow. He did a lot of under the hood stuff in regards to the pitching programs, much like he did with the Cubs, and brings in Bailey, and Bailey basically comes in and says, "Hey, everybody, we know the Tampa model. Throw strike one." Get ahead, throw your best pitch right away, and just throw it for strikes. But on top of that, stop with the four-seam fastball. Let's throw stuff that moves all over the place. And and we've had a lot of this conversation in the last couple of weeks because of exactly what you said. Because the results have been obscenely good. So why is this the case? I think that a big part of this is finding the right guys at the right time in their career, and also accepting the message of saying, if you do this, you're going to be better. Cutter Crawford, Tanner Houck, Nick Pivetta, Garrett Whitlock, all these guys are at the spot where they said, all right, you know what? Just lean into this pitch a little bit more and you'll be better. Now, how that translates for an entire season, both in production and in terms of injuries, I mean, this is the biggest question, I think, in baseball right now, but so far, so good for them.
We're talking to Rob Bradford here on 101 ESPN, joins us via the 101 ESPN hotline. Rob, when you look at that rotation, even though many of them were not drafted or acquired by Chaim Bloom, they were, for the most part, developed while Chaim Bloom was the president of baseball operations, or whatever the specific title was for him while he was in Boston. How much credit does he deserve for what the rotation currently looks like in Boston, in your opinion?
Yeah, the Chaim tenure is a complicated one. And first of all, I think Chaim is like one of the best human beings in the game that I've met. But it's a results business, so that's what we're focusing on. And I will say this is that he did a lot of good things. You mentioned a lot of the guys who have produced and really stepped up, and so he does deserve some credit, absolutely. But the fact of the matter is that they did turn around a lot of stuff that was under the hood that needed to be turned around under the hood during Chaim's era, and that's what they've taken a step forward, at least in terms of the pitching. I think that the biggest knock on Chaim when he was here was just the inability to really be as proactive as they wanted to be, particularly the trade deadline. That's where the narrative really took a hit for him because, a couple of years now really didn't do much. Sort of sat in the middle, and then he had the line last year when they were a game out of the wild card, said, we're underdogs, and everyone cringed because hey, listen, you're a game out of the wild card. Let's go. And you talk to people in baseball, and there's a reluctance to do a deal. And I don't think Chaim is alone in regards to this demeanor when it comes to the new age of baseball executives. There's a lot of we have to win the trade by 70% instead of 51%. And I think that was one of the biggest problems. Now, all that said, I firmly believe that Chaim's the type of guy that when he gets that next chance, that he will absolutely be better and he will learn from. Because when he came from Tampa, he wasn't the guy. He didn't have the experience. And when you go through the gauntlet of Boston of being the guy at the top of the top, then that is the most painful and most valuable experience you can get.
And, Rob, you mentioned those trade deadlines, and I brought that up in our opening segment when we were talking about Chaim Bloom. I'm curious, do you think the way that he constructed teams and the way he operated the trade deadline was more of Chaim Bloom's vision for the team or more of like restraints that were put on him by ownership?
No, I think he just got caught in the middle. I mean, I think honestly he just got caught in the middle where are we in it or are we not in it? And at that time, I don't think it was an ownership thing at all. You go back to, if you look at the trade deadlines, 2021, he did a pretty good job. He got Schwarber, but Schwarber was undervalued because he had a hamstring injury, but he turned out to be really good. Give him credit for that. But then you go to 2022 and 2023. 2022, they had a ton of these guys coming off the books, like high-end guys, Bogarts and J.D. Martinez and Nathan Eovaldi. And they're in it, but they're kind of not in it. So they hold on to them. They trade Christian Vasquez, which was a huge hit to the clubhouse. And so there was this element of you're trying to play both sides of the fence and ask any executive. Like, that doesn't work. And I've used this analogy, guys, a lot lately, which is Chris Young. Dayton Moore told me this on the podcast. Chris Young of Texas last year, right before the deadline, got his guys together before the deadline and said to them, hey, everybody, do we think that we have a chance to win the World Series, even though our record isn't blowing anybody away? Because if we do, we are going to have to get uncomfortable and trade these guys. I don't think that Chaim was willing to get uncomfortable enough when it counted the most at the deadline. That was the problem.
Man, this all sounds eerily familiar to us here in St. Louis, to say the least.
I know
Rob.
how we hired him now.
Yeah, suddenly it's all making a lot of sense. What did he do well? Like, obviously, he wasn't a disaster in his time in Boston. He set the team up, it appears at least, in a decent place for whoever the next guy was that was going to take over for him. What did you view as the strengths of Chaim Bloom as the president of baseball operations?
I think he was good. I think he was good at finding a lot of guys that normally it would be difficult to uncover, which is sort of the holy grail for all of these executives. And when you miss out on one, it really, really owns them. Like I think he had said at one point, what keeps them up isn't like losing to Kyle Schwarber, it's missing out on another guy like a Jeffrey Springs going to Tampa, something like that. But he was pretty good. You look at Garrett Whitlock, and you look at some of these other guys that he managed to fill in the gaps with. Now, were they superstars? No, they weren't. But I will say this also, the trades. Maybe he should have made more trades. Maybe he should have been more proactive. But I mentioned the Christian Vasquez, and he got a lot of heat for this at the deadline. Oh, you traded Vasquez, and Bogarts was upset about it, and the whole clubhouse was upset. But now we're sitting here talking about Wilyer Abreu as possibly being in the Rookie of the Year conversation in the outfield. And that was one of the guys they got. So I think the trades overall that he made were pretty good. But I think that just with Chaim, the biggest thing is it's not just from the outside. I think it's people, the agents, whether it was falling short and going after free agents or whatever it was. It was just getting the willingness to get uncomfortable. And I think that's one of the things that I would hope that the next chance he gets, he would do a better job at.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you about. If Chaim Bloom is the guy that takes over for John Mozeliak, who has said he's going to retire when his contract expires after 2025 season, do you think he would have success with the Cardinals organization?
Yeah, I do. I think that as I said with Chaim, it was one of these things where you had the experience in Boston, and I think it was cart before the horse in Boston. It really was. The ownership group said, yeah, we love the Tampa Bay way, and look at how many wins they have compared to us with the payroll that they had, and so we're going to pluck someone from Tampa Bay. But Chaim wasn't necessarily like the be-all, end-all guy there. Eric Deander was there, and so it wasn't like Chaim absolutely knew how to run the organization. And this wasn't just an organization. This was the Boston Red Sox going through a significant period of transition, starting, by the way, with having to trade a Hall of Famer in Mookie Betts. So I would like to think that going through all of that you would have been able to take a step back and said, okay, this is what worked, this is what did. Even with the manager, the manager, I think if Chaim had to probably do it all over again when they rehire Alex Cora, he probably said, hey, you know what? Alex Cora is a good manager, but is it the perfect guy for us? I don't know because of the relationship that was. So I think that to the overall point is that, yes, I think that he would be pretty good because I do think he's smart enough to learn from whatever mistakes he made in Boston.
Rob, we just got a text on the text line, and you know how radio text lines can be. They said, I hate when you guys have Boston people on, and I end up actually liking them because they're reasonable on the air. I'm mad at you for having this guy on. Appreciate you for hopping on with us today, man. You can hear Rob Bradford as the host of the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast. You can also read his work, A Damn Near Perfect Game with Joe Kelly. It's available on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Rob, we appreciate the time, man. Enjoy the games this weekend. We'll talk with you again soon, my friend.
All right. Honored to talk to you guys. I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
Absolutely. That's Rob Bradford. Appreciate him hopping on with us today. You can follow him on Twitter at Bradfo, Bradfo. That's where you can find him over there. Covers the Red Sox for WEEI up in Boston and does some really cool work with the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast. Joe Kelly's involved with that. It's cool stuff what he's doing. Man. Can I change my tune on the Chaim Bloom stuff?
No, you came in defending him in the office today.
All of this. All of what he said, it makes so much sense as to why he's somebody that the Cardinals will be interested in.
Very Mozeliak-y.
Like the most Mozeliak-y person that you've ever heard of coming from Boston. It's unbelievable. He even dresses like John Mozeliak, by the way. He's just young Mo. That's all it is. It's young Mo that's going to be taking over for slightly older version of John Mozeliak. I'm curious what you guys had to say about that interview, what your thoughts are now on Chaim Bloom compared to what they were, 15 minutes ago. We'll get into some of those and hear your questions coming up next. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Ask us anything here on 101 ESPN.
You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers.
Presented by Window World St. Louis.com. Simply the best for less.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, get them in on the Air Comfort Service text line right now, and we will get some of those. I also want to get some of your reaction to our conversation with Rob Bradford, and if you missed that, check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. Free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
We talked to Rob Bradford about Chaim Bloom and what he did for the Boston Red Sox organization, what he did well, what he thought he did poorly. I left that conversation much more critical of Chaim Bloom than I began said conversation. From the 314, 15 minutes ago, I don't think I had ever heard of Chaim Bloom. Now he terrifies me. Feels about right. Somebody else from the 618 said, we are screwed. Another guy that shops at Banana Republic, not what the Cardinals need.
Text of the day so far.
From the 479, guys, when he said that Chaim Bloom's biggest problem is that he's always caught in the middle between going for it and building for the future, part of me died inside.
Damn, that's tough. Yeah, I felt vindicated from my opening, from the opening segment of saying that I was not the biggest supporter of Chaim Bloom to take over. But B, and I think most importantly, I don't think that this is the best spot for him to take over. And what I mean by that isn't so much the market of the Cardinals, because he's had the balance of a big market and a small market with Tampa Bay. But what we just heard Rob say about, hey, it wasn't a ownership constraint thing at the trade deadline. It was he got stuck in the middle and really didn't know what to do. Welcome to the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals are currently stuck in the middle and really don't know what to do, because their hope was that the young guys would develop, like Walker would be taking that next step this year. Donovan Newbar wouldn't be struggling. Gorman wouldn't be struggling. And we talked about young core would kind of prop up these older guys as they started on the descent. And then all of a sudden, boom, you've got your next wave of Cardinal baseball with Walker, Wynn, Gorman, and Newbar. And because it's had a setback, and the pitching still is lacking in terms of what you have in the system, you're stuck in the middle. And I just don't know if this is the best spot for Chaim Bloom to be taking over. He probably needs to go and start either fresh, where a team is in a rebuild, or he needs to go start and take over a team that's ready to win now. And the Cardinals, unless they pick a direction, aren't either of those. And I don't think you can rebuild here. And I just don't know if I would trust Bloom to get you out of the muddy middle.
Somebody on the text line said something interesting from the 314. Guys, I don't like the sound of having another Mo in charge, but I think having guys like him around is just a symptom of what modern baseball has become. Are there any POBOs out there that aren't like Mo? Where would an organization even find somebody who isn't like that to run their organization? It's a totally fair point. Like, you like Kim Ng, right?
Yeah.
I think she is a lot more similar to Mo than what a lot of people would like to believe. Most of the thinking in modern baseball, and it's because people have just bought into, and it's understandable, it's information. They've bought into the information revolution that's taken place inside of the sport. There's more information in baseball than there is in any other sport other than maybe basketball. Basketball's probably the closest second. Soccer's probably up there as well. I'm probably not giving enough credit there. But those are the ones in terms of the main primary four sports here in North America that people will follow what the numbers tell them. And so in baseball, when the nerds have won, those are the people that now run the organizations. If you're trying to find out, okay, who are the remaining guys that are just still in charge that are less so numbers based, it's really just Dave Dombrowski.
Yeah.
Like, it's just Dombrowski. People will bring up Chris Young. Dude, no. Chris Young is very numbers based, very much so. Now, he is a former player. He brings that perspective to the front office, which I believe is important. But Chris Young is unbelievably intelligent. And if people think that he's not listening to the numbers and having those that guide his decisions, at least, even if they're not like fully making the decisions for him, I think that's nonsense. I don't know where you find this person that we're talking about. It's really just Dombrowski.
Yeah, I think I'd put Preller into this. I don't know if Preller really listens to the numbers, because he says prospects be damned and trades them.
I think he does. I also don't think he knows how to build a team. I think he builds, he accumulates talent. I don't think he does a very good job of building teams.
Totally fair. But he's got a little of Dombrowski to him to where he doesn't really worry about prospects. Sure. And then the only other one, and he doesn't really fall in this because he made the public comment of we want to be an 80 to 85 win team, is DePoto, but he doesn't differently to where he is just like shuffling the pieces on the board. He never feels like he gets better. It's just kind of rearranging everything. But those would be the guys that I can think of, because a lot of those guys just don't exist, and teams don't want to do that because we all know what's going to happen for the Phillies when Dombrowski's gone. It's going to be a long rebuild, and it's going to be tough to take over for him. Look at what happened to Detroit. I feel bad for our guy Al Avila. He got fired because of Dombrowski, because when he left, they were a disaster. But that's what it was. It was a push all in to win now. And guys just don't do that because they fear going all in is what will get them fired, so they prefer to try and build something that is sustainable.
All right, final thing here. Guys, young Mo wasn't all that bad. Maybe the first 7 years of Chaim Bloom won't be that bad either. That's the optimistic look. I also think that the Cardinals were in a much better situation when Mo took over than where they are today. Now, 2007 was bad, don't get me wrong, but it was a one-off.
And you had some guy named Albert Pujols.
Sure, that helps, certainly. And you were able to go out and make the big move for Matt Holliday as well. And then, boom, you're into the next era of Cardinals baseball. And, oh, by the way, Yadier Molina is becoming the Yadi that we now know. You had Adam Wainwright, who at that point had become, like, a number one starter. And the pipeline was starting to proceed forward with a lot of the young talent, pitching-wise, that we eventually saw come through the system. So they were in a better spot then than they are today. That being said, it would not surprise me if we look back 10 years from now and say, hey, how come we didn't see that the Cardinals were set up for future success when they had Gorman and Nootbaar and Donovan and Walker and Wynn and eventually Sajaci, who am I missing? Herrera, Burleson, Scott. How did we not see that? Of course they were set up for future success. That could happen. That's totally possible. But they need to get those guys playing well. Right now, none of them are really performing at the level that would be necessary.
It's funny you say that because, like, I think if you have that success, I think some of that will be pointed at the position player, but I think a lot of that will be the pitching prospects that come through, like Gifting Kins and TK Roby.
Unless they build the way that the Cubs did. Because the Cubs, when they had their run, it was all homegrown position players and free agent talent in the rotation. And then they were able to put together the bullpen.
That's fair. I think
totally you have to have one or the other. You can either build through star pitching. The Mets tried to do that. The Phillies kind of had some of that, although they did go out and acquire their number one guy. But you can either build through pitching or position players. There are very few that are able to build both at the same time. The Orioles might be like the only team that was really able to do that. And even they had to go out and get Corbin Burns to lead their rotation.
They're probably gonna have to go out and get more.
Right.
Like they don't have that deep a pipeline. But yeah, that's a good point. But I think a lot of fans will look at it as the pitching being dried up. But I think what it will have to be is maybe not so much the pitching develops into those number 2 and 3 like Hintz and Roby, is they become those depth pieces that they're missing currently.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, what does this homestand mean for the Cardinals? I know we've done this a million different times. Well, this is when we're going to learn. I'm not saying that. What is the upside that could take place in this 9-game series? What is the downside that could take place during this 9-game series? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
So how important is this next stretch of games, next 9 games?
Extremely. It's vital.
Yeah, because you're playing 3 good ball clubs, and to your point, Kerry, they could easily get swept by the Red Sox and the Orioles and then scratch out maybe a series win against the Cubs, or maybe they take 1 from the Orioles and 1 from the Cubs. It could get really ugly.
They could lose all 3 of these series, go 3-6 in this stretch, and be, where would they be, 10 games back at that point? 9, 10, 12, maybe, who knows? I don't know.
They'd be 21-31 at that point if they go 3-6 in this next stretch of games. It's not ideal, to say the least. With Tanner and Grant, I'm BK. Alex off today. He'll be back in on Monday. T-Bone, we've asked this question, I think, 5 different times so far this year. Hey, is this the series that we learned something about the Cardinals? I'm done asking that question. I think we, generally speaking, kind of know what this team is, and it's not great. But I want to ask it a different way. And it goes off of what you just heard there from the Fast Lane yesterday as they were discussing this homestand 9-game stretch on their show. What is the upside that could take place from this stretch of games? And what does the downside look like? Because I think that's far more interesting than what are we going to learn about them? We're not going to learn a whole lot. It's 9 games, whatever. We have seen 43 of them so far. The upside to me is you go out there and you look better. You look like you did change something in that final game of the series against Milwaukee. The offense clicked a bit. You feel decent, even if not great, about the pitching. And by the way, Jeff Jones mentioned earlier today on Twitter, apparently Sunday is now a TBD. It is no longer a quote-unquote Matthew Liberatore start. Ooh. So keep that in mind as we're looking at what this weekend's going to look like for the Cardinals. Maybe they decide to go a different direction. But the Cardinals have really struggled against teams like this so far this season. And when I say really struggle, I mean the second worst team in all of Major League Baseball. They're 3-11 on the season when they go up against teams that are 500 or better. That's not a crazy criteria to put in. Just teams that are winning clubs. 3-11. Only the Giants have been worse in such games so far this year.
Checks out. You're like
the Cardinals' only series that they've played against those winning teams are the Phillies, the Dodgers, and the Brewers. Now, they're basically 500 against the Brewers this year, and the Phillies and the Dodgers, you can make a case, are the 2 best teams in Major League Baseball. So there is a lot of middle ground between those teams and what you're going to be facing with Boston, Baltimore, and Chicago. It's a different level of team, in my opinion, than what you faced previously. So what you could learn in terms of the ceiling for this upcoming homestand, T-Bone, so maybe the Cardinals have clicked something into place. I don't feel that way right now. I currently go into this series anticipating them not looking very good against Boston, Baltimore, and Chicago. Losing like 6 of 9 and us leaving this homestand saying, yeah, we kind of knew who they were and they ended up playing exactly to those results. But if they don't, if they go out there and they're 6-3 after this homestand, we're going to have to change our tune at some point, because if they do that, they're probably going to be like 1 game back of the wild card and maybe even in a wild card spot at that point. What do you view as, optimistically right now, the upside of this homestand, T-Bone?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think for the upside for me, it would be that Ali Marmol's rallying of the troops while they were leaving L.A. was true, and you're starting to see stuff click for the offense. And probably you see, whether it be Greg Amsinger's Arenado's batting practice, he looks better, or it's Paul Goldschmidt, who I actually think does look a little bit better at the plate, is that the offense does kind of click into place, and you start to see how they envision this team to kind of come together, where it was, hey, we're probably going to have to win baseball games like 5-4. That's probably our goal. We get like a solid start from our starter. Our bullpen does a pretty good job of locking things down for the most part, and our offense scores 5 runs and we win. Because I don't think we're seeing the pitching is starting to normalize. So I think you're going to see them have a tough time with Baltimore, a tough time with the Cubs, potentially a tough time with Boston. Their offense isn't all that great, but it's solid. I think what you would have to see is that the offense finds a way to hit playoff caliber pitching, because even though I'm not convinced the Red Sox are a playoff team, they're pitching like a playoff team. They've got, as I mentioned with Rob when we had him on, they've got the best starting pitching ERA in all of baseball so far this season. Baltimore, you're going to see some really good pitching from them. The Cubs pitching staff has been awesome as well. So if the offense is clicking into place, these are the kind of games that you expect them to kind of help you win along the way. Score 3-4 runs, find a way to win, and see if the pitching staff can do their job and kind of slow down these offenses. But I I'm not expecting that.
No,
but that
nobody should.
That would be the optimistic spot of this is the offense clicks into place and you see how the Cardinals envision the season kind of going.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of the stretch the Blues had back in like January when they had that stretch of like 9 or 10 really tough teams. Like they had teams like the Rangers,
Sharks.
the Hurricanes. Well, those were the tough teams for the Blues. But the top teams in the NHL they were going up against in January.
Yeah, that was when Alex bought back in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
how did they do? I don't remember. By the way,
they played well.
They were well above 500.
We were like, oh wow, this team might actually have a little something.
Yeah.
They're beating quality opponents. In that stretch, they beat Dallas, they beat Florida, they beat Dallas actually multiple times in that stretch. They ended up beating Vancouver, they beat Carolina, they beat New York. We're like, oh. Okay.
And look at where those teams are now.
Yeah, maybe there's something here. And then, unfortunately, for all of us that ended up watching, the Detroit game happened, and then they go in that slide, and then they have the 3 games in New York where they lose all 3 of them. And then we knew, like, okay, yeah, there's nothing here. There's nothing more to be had here.
Right. But translating this back to the Cardinals, like, I remember in that time frame talking about that, saying, like, maybe best case scenario, if this team goes 500 during that stretch against those teams, you're happy with that because those are the top teams in the NHL, and they ended up doing a lot better than 500. For the Cardinals, I think it should kind of be the same thing. If you want to set your expectations high expectations should probably be around 500 for this stretch. And again, that's kind of a stretch. But for the Cardinals, I think the main thing, for me anyway, I just don't want to see them shoot themselves in the foot. Like, if they go out and they get beat by these good teams, fine. Like, they're better than you.
Yep.
But if they go out and they shoot themselves in the foot or they blow a 5-run lead, like, that's where it's going to be extremely problematic.
Yeah, the funny thing is that you're right. If they go 500, like, let's say they go 5-4 in this stretch of 9 games, nobody's going to be, like, throwing a party about that. But that's kind of what you should do against really good opponents. When you go into the playoffs and you're going up against the best teams that you could possibly face, all you got to do is win one more of them in a 7-game series. That's it. It's all they ask of you to be able to move on to the next round. So in these series, if you go 5-4, first of all, you're almost doubling the number of wins that you already have this year against the quality opponents on your schedule, and you've done so in fewer games. And it will show, okay, there's signs of life, if nothing else. But it's not just this 9-game stretch. And I'm not just trying to do the schedule thing here, right? But you've got this 9-game homestand, and then you have 3 games against a terrible Cincinnati Reds team. Yes, they have Elliot De La Cruz. The rest of the roster's terrible so far this year. And then you've got another big test on the road against Philadelphia. 3 more games there. And then the schedule really opens up for a bit, where you'll have Houston, who's not good this year. Colorado, not good. Pittsburgh, we're seeing, not good. You have an opportunity here, if you can get through this 9-game stretch, to start racking up some wins. I can't believe in any of that right now. I don't. I do not believe in any of that because the downside case also exists, and this is something we should discuss. They could easily go 2-7 in this stretch, and the season is over. Over. Because if you go 2-7 here and you're 20-32, you're going to be back to where you were at this point last year. And at that point, all of us knew. There was no more asking about it. There was no more dreaming on it. It was the Cardinals are done. They're done. There's no way for them to get back in it because they're too far back. I don't know what would lead to them going 2-7 in this stretch, but if you get there, yeah, we'll all be able to say it. Even the most optimistic people on our text line will say, yeah, you guys are right. The Cardinals aren't going to be able to do anything of meaning this year.
Yeah, I think 2-7, and you can already declare yourself a seller, to your point there. And I don't know how you could have any optimism. And to your question of, like, I don't know how they get there, it's the offense. The offense would have them go 2-7 to where they don't hit playoff caliber pitching. And I think that's the biggest problem for them is, yeah, look, we can celebrate the Angels where they scored 7 and 10 in a game. But look, we talked about it. That's not a good baseball team. They don't have good pitching. They gifted you a bunch of runs. You know who's not going to gift you runs? The Boston Red Sox, the Baltimore Orioles, the Chicago Cubs, who are playing really well. You're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to hit for some power. You're going to have to do some of the small ball kind of things that they have been doing currently to try and generate offense. The offense is the thing that will be how you either leave this run feeling like you are building some momentum where you play about 500 baseball, and then to your point, kind of try and take advantage of the schedule next month when you have a easier stretch with Houston and Pittsburgh that come into town and Colorado as well. Or the offense is going to be the thing that you leave this stretch going, yeah, it's just not going to get fixed this year, and this is why the Cardinals are going to become sellers by the trade deadline.
I remember you guys talking about that stretch against the Angels, and if they were to get swept or maybe lose 2 of 3, maybe jobs could be on the line. Do you see jobs being on the line if they were to go 2-7 these next 3 series?
I don't think so. I think that kind of saved them in that regard. I think they were on the precipice. I think that in that Angels series, if they got swept or if they looked really bad and they lose 2 out of 3, I think there was a chance that sweeping changes ended up being made. I think that saved them. Now, I don't know if it should, right?
I don't think it should.
Winning 2 out of 3 against one of the worst collections of talent that I've seen in recent memory.
But it's also how they won their 2 games. It took an 8-run inning, and it took a game where they blew a 5-run lead.
Yeah, and the Angels gave it away. And to your point earlier on, if you get beat, so be it. The Angels didn't really get beat. They gave it to the Cardinals, and the Cardinals were just a willing participant in the transaction. I don't think that there will be like firings or sweeping changes if that happens in the next 9 games. I think you have to get a little further than that. If they go 3-6, for example, in this homestand, and then they lose 2 out of 3 against Cincinnati, and then they're swept on the road against Philadelphia, and then you see against Houston and Colorado some struggles at home again, that gets us into mid-June. That's when I could see something maybe changing. But I don't think we see anything before then.
I don't think you'd see any change from this homestand, and it's twofold for me. One, if you were going to make a move, losing at home to the White Sox 2-3 is the time that you should have done that. And 2, look, we saw the reports. Mo was supposed to go fly out to L.A. We thought that was, okay, getting a vibe for the locker room, and then he didn't end up going, and they happened to take 2 of 3 in that series. To me, they're not making a change until you get to the All-Star break. Like, that's when I would circle. If they're going to make a change, it's going to be about the same time they did it with Matheny. And I understand, like, they're not in the same spot they were with Matheny. Like, they still had playoff hopes at that point, and they could be totally out of it by the time we get to the All-Star break this year. That's the spot for me that I would circle. Like, that's the next date that I have circled on my calendar for keep an eye on changes.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex out today, back in on Monday, coming up in about 15 minutes or so. It's interesting when you look at the top ERAs in Major League Baseball, the best pitchers so far this year when it comes to rotation, guys. Why are so many of them over the age of 28? What are we seeing there? What's changing in the dynamic in Major League Baseball? We'll get into that coming up in about 15 minutes or so. But coming up next, some meanwhile in the news. Big story in the world of golf earlier today. Couldn't believe what I woke up to there. Grant has a question for us when it comes to the NHL's playoffs last night. Lots to get into. Non-Cardinals, non-Blues related. We'll get to some of that next year on 101 ESPN.
And next to play from Texas, Scotty Scheffler.
Hours ago, we really, truly were not sure we would see that swing from world number one. But Scotty Scheffler, his second round is underway.
That's what it sounded like earlier today on ESPN Plus, as Scotty Scheffler, never a doubt in my mind, ended up being able to make his tee time for the PGA Championship. He is currently 2 under on the day as he starts the back nine for himself. With Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. We're getting into some meanwhile in the news. I wanted to talk about some of the other big stories across the sports world, give them a little bit of time today here on the show instead of just going Cardinals with you all day long. So if you missed it, T-Bone mentioned this during the break. I got the same alert that I'm sure many of you did this morning. Hey, Scotty Scheffler has been arrested. What? For what? And then it continues on for trying to get into the golf course. And I was like, what? Explain. It's like 7 in the morning. What is going on right now? Why is Scotty Scheffler in jail? And so I turn on ESPN and I see one of their reporters who was apparently like right behind all of this action, and Jeff Darlington, who covers the NFL, by the way, but is doing some golf stuff for them while it's on ESPN Plus for the PGA Championship. He's like, hey, listen, I saw the whole thing. Scotty Scheffler was trying to follow the other golfers that were going in this certain way, and apparently a police officer told him, hey, you can't go in that way. And he was like, well, I'm just going to follow what the other guy told me to do, which is to go this way. And the police officer, according to the reports, like puts himself on his car, like he's holding on to the side of the car, like apparently, and is dragging along for 10 yards, again, according to reports, while Scotty Scheffler is trying to get to his job. And apparently, according to the police report, his darn pants are just ruined beyond repair, which are $80 in value. Again, according to the police report.
That's tough.
He goes to jail. He gets booked. He's been charged with multiple different things, including like a very low-level felony, apparently, in Louisville. Tanner, what was your reaction when you saw this story earlier today? It's genuinely one of the more wild stories that I've seen, that I've woken up to in recent memory.
I was shocked and just flat out confused as to what had happened. So when I saw it on my phone originally, I thought he got hurt because I saw the notification. I kind of rolled back over and slept for another couple minutes, and then I rolled back over again and saw he'd been arrested and it wasn't an injury. It's one of those wild stories I think I can recall in sports history over the last decade. It's unbelievable. And now you look at him and he's playing in the tournament and he's 2 under currently, which is just chef's kiss on top of everything that's been going on.
Golf is such a mental game, and for you to be able to overcome all of this from the morning, I can't imagine.
And he showed up for, I think it was like, 3-4 hours before his round to probably get in, warm up, get things going. And then I see he shows up like with less than an hour to warm up, and there he goes to the tees, birdies the first hole. It's unbelievable. And for golf, a sport that has now had with the number 1 player in the world having all kinds of controversies or things that happened to them. Like think back to Tiger when he had all his stuff go on with him, and now you've got the current number 1 who's getting arrested in Louisville and ruining $80 pants while driving with his car. It's an unbelievable story. Like I have no major takeaway from it outside of what the bleep just happened. It's 7:30 in the morning. I shouldn't be waking up to this.
Now, it is worth noting, and somebody on the text line mentioned this, that, hey, guys, somebody died in this scenario. And sure, absolutely. What happened that led to the traffic jam is legitimately a tragedy. Somebody that was one of the vendors was hit by a bus and passed away, and that's what led to the traffic jam. That is obviously not a laughing matter at all. It's horrible what took place earlier this morning. What it led to was Scotty Scheffler trying to get around that traffic and made either a stupid decision, depending on whose story you believe here, and like going way beyond what any reasonable person should try to accomplish, or one of the more ridiculous stories that you could possibly imagine. Like, there's really no in between in terms of what took place earlier this morning. And if it is on the ridiculous side of things, of just like, man, how are you arresting this guy? What in the world? How did this elevate to this situation? Somebody on the text line said, guys, this could end up becoming something that it is the exact type of story that golf needed. Man, there's some truth to that. Like Scotty not, again, setting aside what led to this. Important disclaimer there. Scotty Scheffler, for a lot of people that are not legit golf fans, nameless and faceless. My wife has no idea who Scotty Scheffler was. She knows who Tiger Woods is, and there's a lot of controversy that led to that, a lot of dominance that led to that. He was one of the most famous people in America. There aren't a whole lot of current golfers that have that kind of notoriety. Scotty Scheffler, for obviously not great reasons earlier today, became more of a household name. And if you're golf, that is something, for right or wrong, you can now capitalize on. And I will be curious to see what that looks like long term for him, and if this made him more of a name. It's weird that that's how it happens, is you get arrested going to a golf event, but it will be interesting to see what takes place next.
And to that point, like, I'm not a big golf fan. I can't remember the last golf tournament I watched. It was probably when Tiger returned to the Masters after missing some time. But this all of a sudden has become must-watch television for me because I'm fascinated to see, like, if he wins this tournament now. Because of, if it is on the side that you're talking about, where it is just this bizarre story that ends up happening, and we'll see what happens. It is one of the most wild stories I've ever seen for a guy to then go out and currently now is 3 under on the day, moving up the leaderboard, and could go on to potentially win this PGA championship.
Somebody on the text line said Nike needs to get him an orange jumpsuit to wear tomorrow ASAP. They should absolutely have an orange polo for him. That should be his outfit for the rest of the weekend.
And like ripped up pants?
100%. All right, a couple other things that we wanted to get to. Grant was all fired up this morning. He comes in, he said, did you guys see this Elias Pettersson thing? This charging call? Grant, what happened last night in the NHL? Why were you so fired up?
Yeah, I thought it was a joke. Elias Pettersson got called for charging last night. I don't know if anybody saw it, but he was basically standing still. He played the puck, and then someone was coming up from behind him to hit him. And so at the last second, Elias Pettersson did leave his feet. He turned to, avoid the direct hit. And in the process, he leaned in a little bit to the player that was going to hit him. And Elias Pettersson got a penalty call on him for charging. I was baffled by the call. I think it's a joke. I think it'd be a joke for a preseason penalty, let alone a playoff penalty. And my thing is, like, yes, the rule states that you can't leave your feet and hit somebody. But I wouldn't call what Elias Pettersson did really a hit. Like, the guy that was going to hit him ran into him and fell. All Elias Pettersson did was jump in a standing fashion. Like, he wasn't moving. He left his skates a little bit, turned, and then got a penalty called on him because the player ran into him and he fell.
I just thought it was so stupid for him to jump. Like, I don't, should it have been called a penalty? No, I'm in complete agreement with you, Grant. But when you jump, you put yourself into a compromised situation. Either, like, if you're bracing for somebody to hit you, the worst thing you could do is jump into the air. You lose all center of gravity in that scenario. So you're either making it harder for you to be able to brace for the hit that's coming your way, or you're putting yourself into a compromising situation where the rule book does say if you jump into somebody, and if
he didn't jump into him, though.
I understand, but if you jump, if you leave your feet, you can be called for a penalty. So either way, it was a dumb play in my mind by Elias Pettersson. Should it have been called a penalty? No, we're in total agreement there. But I think Pettersson put himself into a bad spot where he shouldn't have left his feet. Again, just a silly play by him. Shouldn't have been called. Bad call by the referees. I think Pettersson, though, is not exactly like this bystander in this scenario, personally.
Yeah, by the letter of the law, is it a penalty? Yeah, I don't think it should be called a penalty, but I also don't think it's like a bad play by Pettersson. Like, I think jumping to try and protect yourself when you're about to get destroyed like that from behind, it feels smart to try and absorb some of that blow.
To jump?
Yeah.
No, you absolutely... I've never played a game of hockey in my life. I should say it on the front end.
Neither have I, but...
I don't... I'm going to go out... Grant, you've played more hockey than the two of us combined.
I've never played hockey, to be fair. But I've watched a lot of it.
Jumping while taking on a hit does not feel like a great idea. doesn't seem like the number
I'm not
one thing
arguing whether or not it was smart for Pettersson to do. It was a bang-bang play, and his instinct was to jump to get out of the way. In the process, he jumped, was leaning a little bit towards the player who hit him, and got called for a penalty. Like, if you're talking about charging and leaving your feet, it's leaving your feet and putting all of your momentum and weight into a hit.
A lot of the times into a board. Like, you're going into the boards, you're leaving your feet. And, like, we saw this with Braden Shin in the 2022 playoff run for the Blues. I think it was against the Avs, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been the Wild. But in that series, Braden Shin, I thought it was a ticky-tack call, but he really levels the dude into the boards, and they called him for charging, and they said that he left his feet on that hit. That's typically how you see this in a playoff atmosphere. It's very rare that you see a call like that made in the playoffs. Maybe you'd see it in the regular season, but almost never in the playoffs. And so for that reason, I did think it was pretty ticky-tack. In the Rangers game, Chris Kreider, my boy, we got a text on the text line, by the way, whenever we came on the air, saying BK probably needs a cigarette after that performance by Chris Kreider. You bet your ass, man. A cigarette and a sandwich would be fantastic. A hat trick by Chris Kreider to send the Rangers back to the finals in the Eastern Conference. Just a fantastic game by him. He's one of the better postseason performers that we have in the NHL right now. He consistently racks up goals every time that his team gets there. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah, and it's crazy, isn't it, that a couple of years ago we were talking about Chris Kreider maybe not being a Ranger and getting moved, and then you see what happens in a series like this where
should have been moved to the Blues.
Yeah, it would be nice, but Rangers won 7 games in a row in the playoffs, and then they lost a couple to Carolina. But to have that performance after being down 3-1 in the third period, to come back and win that game in an elimination fashion, he joins Mark Messier and Wayne Gretzky as the only player to score a hat trick in a single period in playoff history for the Rangers. So
amazing.
Really impressive for him.
47 goals in 117 playoff games.
Dang.
47 and 117.
And he's got 10 points in 10 games so far this playoffs with 7 goals. But you want to talk about like a clutch performance there. They lose that game last night. Carolina's winning that series.
I agree.
You can't convince me otherwise because they'd come back from down 3-0. So now there's no pressure on Carolina. They did the hard part. And then you go and play them in Game 7. Yeah, the Rangers needed that game last night. I know it wasn't an elimination game for them. They had to win that game because I do not believe they win Game 7, and Kreider shows up and comes up huge in the third period.
I'll tell you what, I'm not as much looking forward to the Stanley Cup final as I'll be looking forward to Rangers and Panthers in the Eastern Conference final.
Oh, dude,
that'll be a hell of a series.
Be amazing. That final is going to be absolutely incredible. All right, final thing here. The Minnesota Timberwolves, I know, Grant, you probably do not care about this at all. Totally understandable. The Timberwolves dominated against the Denver Nuggets last night.
Weren't they up by 50 at one point?
They ended up winning by 45, 115-70, and that's against the Denver Nuggets, who have an outstanding offense. Now, their offense has been a bit up and down so far in this postseason, but they are going to force a Game 7 in this series. Timberwolves got up 2-0 in this series, and then the Nuggets really started to have their full force coming, and then the Timberwolves are able to come back yesterday and get that win. T-Bone, this is one of the more anticipated games in the NBA that I've seen in the last few years in terms of this early in a postseason. The Timberwolves have a chance to develop a superstar right now. Anthony Edwards is one of the most compelling young players in a sport that doesn't really have a ton of young, great, transcendent players. He has an unbelievable personality. He's fun as hell to watch on the basketball court. He's super competitive. He plays above the rim. He's got a lot of like young Kobe resemblance in terms of the style of play that you see with him. I want to see Minnesota take this series. I want to see them finish this thing because you could see something where Edwards ends up getting this like national spotlight over the next couple of rounds potentially and becomes a legitimate household name, which is something that this league really needs.
Yeah, if Minnesota does end up winning this and they come from behind 3-2, you will see the conversation in the offseason of, is Anthony Edwards the guy that takes the reign from LeBron in terms of just being the face of the league, to your point? The NBA probably needs Minnesota to win this series because of what you just said. Now, does that mean it's going to make for potential where Minnesota can get to the finals and have that excitement around like it being a big team? No. But I personally don't think you're going to see them win this one.
You don't think so?
I think the Nuggets beat them because they're still, to me at least, a team that's kind of still learning on the fly as playoff success and what it needs to do and how do you beat Nikola Jokic, who had an okay game last night. I think you're going to see the Nuggets win, and I think next year is the year where you see kind of the Anthony Edwards kind of come out party, and you see the Timberwolves really start to assert themselves in the Western Conference.
It's all going to come down to Jamal Murray. If Jamal Murray doesn't get things going offensively, then the Nuggets are done. But we know at any point he could go out for 40. He could go for 40 in Game 7. Shouldn't surprise anybody. Have the game-winning shot. Like, that's just who he is. I think that Minnesota's going to be able to pull this thing off, man. I do. I think they're going to ultimately win this series. They win it in 7, and we'll see what they can do in the Western Conference Finals. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. All right, in 15 minutes, we'll dive into the junk drawer. But coming up next, what's leading to so many older pitchers having success this year in Major League Baseball? We'll talk about it here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals had an off day yesterday. They'll be back today to kick off a series with the Red Sox. Kyle Gibson gets the first of this series tonight at Busch Stadium. First pitch at 7:15. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we'll have NHL playoff coverage for you. Bruins and Panthers Game 6. The Panthers can move on to face the Rangers in the Eastern Conference Final with a win tonight. Pre-game coverage on 101 ESPN starting at 5:30. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Something's happening in Major League Baseball right now that I find really interesting. There's a shift in who the best pitchers are in the league. We used to see young guys would come up and they'd have success right away, and we'd see them kind of take the league by storm. Hell, here in St. Louis, think of the number of young starters that you've seen develop right away. They just get to the big league level. Michael Wacha is one of these guys, and they immediately have a lot of success. Well, as you look around the league right now, most of the guys that are having a ton of success are on the older side of things. And I'm not talking about the Cardinals rotation where they're all 40, but they're like 30 plus for the most part. Tanner, there are currently 30 qualified starters in Major League Baseball with a sub 3.1 ERA, 30 of them. So on average, one per team. The only pitchers on that list of 30 that are age 27 or younger are Javier Assad for the Chicago Cubs, Reese Olson for the Detroit Tigers. He's been really good this year. Bryce Miller for Seattle, Jared Jones for Pittsburgh, and Andrew Abbott of Cincinnati. So 5 of the 30 are 27 years old or younger. If you want to take that down a notch and just look at the guys that are under 25, it's only Assad, Olson, and Jones. The vast majority of the pitchers that are having success, real success, as starters this season are 28 or above, which is essentially second contract. It's guys that have made it through their pre-arb and arbitration years, because a lot of those guys are coming up at 22, 23, 24 years old. So they're getting either at the end of their deals or hitting free agency and having success. T-Bone, do you think this is something that we're going to see as a trend across Major League Baseball, where you do see more guys that take longer and eventually develop as they get closer and closer to free agency or hit free agency and then have success at their second team? Kind of like what we're seeing with, who's the guy that went from Detroit and ended up going... Turnbull, for example. He's having a lot of success right now with Philly. Do you think we're going to see more of that in the future? We're seeing some of it right now with guys that have left the Cardinals, for example. Jordan Hicks, Reynaldo Lopez is one of those players. Is this something you believe will become a trend across Major League Baseball?
Yeah, I do. And I would be curious, like, if you go back even like 10 years, I bet it's probably a trend from then too, because I think what you're seeing now is less of teaching pitching down in the minor leagues and more of throwing gas in the minor leagues. And what I think leads to that is you need guys at like a Turnbull, for example, or younger pitchers. We see them all the time that come up through a system where, sure, they throw hard and it's big, it's sexy, it's wow, 100 miles an hour as a starter. Look at Hunter Green for the Cincinnati Reds, for example. No idea where the ball's going. Truly has no idea where the ball is going. And you see a lot of walks from those guys. And when you get to that point, if you know you're going up against a starter that, for example, can't locate his fastball, well, you can eliminate that pitch. And now you can start to sit on something else. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing is as these guys are in the big leagues a lot longer, you start to see those young guys like a Spencer Turnbull go from a guy that's a thrower more to a pitcher. And I'm not saying they're going to completely fix their command, because sometimes that is something that just guys can't figure out, but they become more of a pitcher in my mind, to where they start to use the breaking ball to set up the fastball, and then they can use the fastball and paint it a little bit better. I think you are really seeing that as a trend, and I wonder if that's been a trend throughout kind of the history of baseball now that we've gotten more into guys are throwing harder as starters. I think what you see is a lot of those young guys just don't know where it's going, and that's why veterans matter.
So we got this from the 618. I figured we'd get some of this. Guys, it's been a trend forever. What the hell are you talking about? What are you basing this on? Okay, let's go back to 2021. Here's the list of pitchers that were aged 27 or younger in 2021 in the top 15 in Major League Baseball in ERA. Corbin Burns, Walker Buehler, Julio Urias, Max Fried, Lance McCullers, and Sandy Alcantara. If you want to go a little further down, Jose Barrios, Lucas Giolito, Chris Flexen, Tyler Mahle fit into this criteria. Like, we have seen younger pitchers have success earlier than what we are seeing right now in Major League Baseball. And I'm trying to find out why. Why is that? What is leading to this lack of success for younger starters at the Major League level right now? As velo is becoming more and more and more important, we are seeing fewer and fewer and fewer of the young guys that are succeeding. Why? Why is that happening? 2019, guys that had a ton of success at that point early on in the season. Michael Soroka, Jack Flaherty, Walker Buehler, Shane Bieber, Dakota Hudson, Luis Castillo, Lucas Giolito, all of these guys, 26 years old or younger, all of them among the top 20 in Major League Baseball in ERA that season. What's changed? Because we're 5 years beyond that, we're 3 years beyond the 2021 season, and we're seeing fewer young starters that are having that kind of a breakthrough. I'm genuinely asking why. I don't know the answer to this. I think it could be what you said, where it is about control. It's about command. It's about guys getting to the big league level. It could be about injuries. It could be about guys that are throwing harder than ever, and so they're having more injuries than ever before, and you're just seeing fewer of them that are able to maintain the stuff that they had previously, and it takes a while to come back from those injuries. I don't know. I can't explain why this is happening, but I think it's something that the Cardinals should be paying attention to, because as you look at the players that are in their system currently, most of them are 22 or younger. And so if this is the next wave of what pitching is going to look like, it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to be basically the defenseman of the NHL becomes pitching in Major League Baseball, and you just got to wait until they're like 26, 27, 28 years old for them to mature. Well, then the guys that are currently in the system will not be the guys that you can rely on for another 4 or 5 seasons. And that means we've got a massive gap here in St. Louis that they're going to have to fill. And it can't be every year going back to the next Lance Lynn or Kyle Gibson or Steven Matz. You're eventually going to have to find a new way through this thing.
Yeah, at some point you will have to see if you have somebody that is ahead of that curve too. You know, it could be as simple as to your question of like, why is this? It could be kind of what we see with NHL goalies, to where it is, hey, this current generation of pitchers that are coming up, there's just not as many great ones that we're seeing. Like a lot of those guys that you mentioned that were younger, like Corbin Burns, as we're seeing, that guy's a stud. Sandy Alcantara, that guy was a stud once he finally kind of built into his body as a younger guy. And the reason I brought up NHL goalies is I think you see a lot of good goalies in the NHL, but there's not as many great ones. You know, when you think back to a lot of the great ones from just a couple years ago, you had a bunch of guys that you could look at and go, that guy's really great goalie, that guy's really great goalie, that guy's really great goalie. Now it's like, who's the great goalie in the NHL? There's like 2 that we look at. It's Vasilevsky in Tampa, and it's is it Shesterkin in New York? Is that the other one I'm thinking of? Yeah. Like, it's just 2. Most of it is just kind of guys that we always talk about as being good regular season goalies, and I think Bennington falls into that. It could be as simple as that, but you're right. The Cardinals at some point, I don't know how you fill that gap if it's not just free agent signings. Like, I think part of it is you have to bring those guys up and go through a quote-unquote retool with your pitching staff and see if those guys can learn at the big league level. And that's what they tried with Liberatore the last 2 years, and kind of came to the conclusion of, hey, he's probably a bullpen arm, at least for now. Maybe we can go back to trying him as a starter in future years. That's probably what they would have to do. Either fill it with free agents like the Lynn and the Gibsons, or you have to bring them up and kind of have them grow at the major league level, get that experience, and see if they can build from there.
So for just context on this, going back 10 years ago to 2014, even further, guys that were at 25 or younger that finished that season with a 3.1 ERA or better. Chris Sale, Henderson Alvarez,
I don't know who that
Alex
is.
Wood, Alex Cobb, Julio Teheran, Madison Bumgarner, Sonny Gray, Steven Strasburg. It's like half of the list of guys in Major League Baseball that year that had a 3.1 ERA or better, and all of those names that I just mentioned were 25 or younger.
Yeah,
there's something happening in Major League Baseball. Like it's a legitimate crisis around the league in terms of the young Major League starters. I've never seen more great relievers than what we're seeing coming through systems all across the league right now. But the lack of starting pitchers that are reaching the big leagues is jarring, man. It's really jarring. And you look down at the minor league level right now and you're trying to find, okay, where are the next guys coming from? Dude, it's hard to find. There aren't very many good starting pitchers at the minor league level currently.
I wonder, I'm just thinking out loud, and I guess that's what we're doing in this segment, honestly, is Because we talked about this, there were how many guys last year that threw, what was it, 150? Was that what the number was we put in AAA? It was like 5 guys that did it. It was a very small number. McGreevy happened to be one of them.
There were, in AAA last year, 9 pitchers that threw at least 150 innings. There was 1 that threw 180. If you're looking for 160 plus, it was just 6.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's a part of it because, we always talk about, well, how do you learn something, whether it be like us doing radio or anything in like just regular life. It's doing it constantly, trying to work on it while you're doing it on the fly. Well, if you're only throwing like 4, like down in the minor leagues, like Quinn Matthews, who the Cardinals just promoted, I saw he had like a 3-start stretch where he threw like 10 innings. That's not starts. That's like throwing 3 innings at a time. You're not really learning how to start, if that's the case, in my opinion. And this is probably old man screams at clouds moment for me right now. But for me, for you to learn to be a starting pitcher, going through the minor leagues should be eating more innings, throwing more innings like Michael McGreevy did last year, to where you end up throwing 150 innings, because when you get to the major leagues, sure, they're going to be a little more cautious with you, but man, they want you to go 6 innings as a starter. They want you to be ready to go. So if you're in the minor leagues like Tink Hintz when he was coming up 2 years ago, and you're throwing 2-3 innings at a time, that's not really starting pitching. That's more of a relief appearance that happened to start a baseball game.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, are we almost pushing these guys that would have been starters to becoming relievers too often now too? Like, is that something where we're needing so many relievers because so many of them get hurt so often that you just push guys through the minor league system, and if they throw hard, hey, get them to the majors. Get them to the majors. We don't want them to get hurt in the minor leagues. Get them to the majors. And then they get pigeonholed into becoming relievers for the next 10 years, 6 years, 5 years.
Ryan Helsley, Jordan Hicks.
Sure, yeah. Or many others that have come through the Cardinal system over the last decade or so. And previously, like Rosenthal, hey, who were you going to kick out of the rotation to put him into the rotation? You weren't going to do it. But now, yeah, they've got some openings. So I don't know, man. I find it to be really interesting. Some of you clearly, based on the text line, do not. But
are they bored?
No, not that. Somebody on the text line said, hey, BK, how far out do you got to go to find an obscure topic on baseball? You realize they've been playing the game for 110 years. This bleep has always happened. It'll happen again. It happened before. Your stat is so lame. Okay. I find it to be interesting that Major League Baseball has a pitching crisis on its hands. Guys are getting hurt more than ever. They're throwing harder than ever. And the pitching has been better in terms of the results than ever before. And yet, we're seeing fewer young starters succeed than ever in recent memory, at least. I've gone back the last decade to find how this year compares. It doesn't. There's nothing that compares to what we have seen this year. So I find that to be super interesting, especially when the Cardinals are trying to rely on young pitchers in the future seasons. And many of the pitchers that they're relying on are significantly younger than the guys that are having success at the big league level. Feels like there's a bit of a gap there. Junk Shore coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
Bad news for all you seafood lovers out there. Red Lobster is expected to file for bankruptcy. According to the Wall Street Journal, this is because a, quote, all-you-can-eat shrimp deal that executives hoped would turn the chain around has actually contributed toward millions of dollars in losses.
This feels good.
Red Lobster, one of the first U.S. casual dining chains and innovator in the sector, suffered from a strategic challenge. An all-you-can-eat shrimp deal that executives believed would turn the chain around actually contributed towards millions of dollars in losses. Their majority owner said it had lost too much money on the chain earlier this year, and they have decided that they would like to cut bait, end quote. T-Bone?
That's tough.
This was supposed to be the idea that saved Red Lobster. All-you-can-eat shrimp. What more could you ask for? Apparently, as Grant was serving at Red Lobster, he served one too many portions of the all-you-can-eat shrimp. Grant, when you were there, I used to work at Olive Garden, so we would do the all-you-can-eat soup, salad, and breadsticks, and there would be people that would come in and would have like 8 servings of each, and it was amazing to me that they would get that. It was like $9.99. When you were at Red Lobster, what was it like as you guys had the all-you-can-eat shrimp?
Traumatic is the first word that comes to mind. I mean, honestly, it's satisfying that this is the reason why things are going south for Red Lobster. And I don't have anything against Red Lobster. For the most part, I liked working there, but endless shrimp was horrific. Like, I remember this one guy.
Cheddar Bay biscuits are delicious.
Oh yeah, that those make it all worth it. Yeah. I ate way too many of those while I worked there. Sure. But I worked at one close to here, and I worked at one on Long Island when I lived there. Yeah, it was terrible. I remember one person specifically would literally come in. He would obviously eat the shrimp. He would line up all of his shrimp tails on the table to, like, I guess, count however many he was eating. Go to the bathroom, make himself sick so he could come back and eat more shrimp.
Oh.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, no, that would happen.
That's called
somebody on our text line said they literally ate 152 shrimp in one sitting.
Is this the person that lined them up on the table?
That's
They were
impressive.
counting as they went. Oh my God, man! I cannot imagine eating that much shrimp.
I don't know.
I like shrimp. There's nothing in my life that I like that much.
That's what I was just about to say. I don't know if I can name one thing that I really love that I could have like that big of a serving.
If you get sick with it, I feel like that would ruin it for you. Like, if you truly just love shrimp, like, it's the greatest thing in the world. The moment that I throw something up, I never want to have anything to do with it ever again.
Is that why you gave up meat?
Yeah, for sure. I got sick because I have had 7 different bouts with food poisoning over the last calendar year.
Trust me, I know.
One of those experiences, I didn't get it from the chips, but I ate like tortilla chips. I was chips and salsa. And that's what I had. That was the last meal, quote unquote, before I got sick. Dude, I didn't eat tortilla chips for like the next 6 months. I couldn't.
Really?
It would like make me physically ill if I had smelled or consumed tortilla chips because it felt like I was going to go back to throwing up afterwards.
I actually had a similar experience with tortilla chips before. It wasn't like throwing up, but I got sick after, and I don't think it was related to it, but I got sick and didn't like them.
I think tortilla chips can give you food poisoning.
No, that's what I said. I didn't get the food poisoning from it.
I know, but
I had food poisoning, and then I ate.
I get it.
I didn't know at the time that I had food poisoning.
Have
obviously.
you ever?
I ate chips, and then I went to throw up, and the thing that it tasted like was the chips. Unfortunately,
have you ever had where you end up getting food poisoning or sick after eating something that somebody else cooked, and then you can't have their food again? Because I can remember that. So my mom's a kindergarten teacher, and I can remember one of her coworkers making it was like a cake, it was like a chocolate cake or something. I remember eating it and the next day getting sick, and then I never ate anything that she'd bring over food like, hey, I made pie for my class. I was like, no way would I eat anything you ever baked because I got sick from it last time, and there's no way it was from the cake.
That's the thing, is it's so hard to be able to actually pinpoint what made you sick.
Yeah.
Like it can take place any time over like a 24, 48 hour period or whatever, based upon my research that I've had. to do multiple times. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, how long should the Cardinals wait to make a move with their POBO? T-Bone has some significant thoughts on this. We'll get to that in a little bit. Coming up next, though, what are the Cardinals' reasons for optimism? I want to hear from you guys. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you are still holding out hope for this team, what is it that makes you feel optimistic right now? We'll get into that next year on 101 ESPN.
What are the things that you see that you think will turn around? Because the offense remains dreadful. And I'm talking about statistically dreadful. The starting pitching is starting to fade a little bit here. The bullpen, we'll get into those numbers. The bullpen has taken a step back as of late. What are the things that you see right now that lead you to believe that there's going to be a turnaround?
That was Anthony Stalter yesterday on the Fast Lane, asking the question that I want to get from the audience as well. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you remain optimistic about the St. Louis Cardinals, you believe this team's going to get it turned around, this 9-game homestand, you think this is when we see it. This is the moment where it all comes together for your St. Louis Cardinals. If you believe everything that I just said, I would love to hear why on the text line at 314-399-9646. Now, Tanner, if I were to play the optimistic card, the reason why I would be optimistic is because of the left-handed bats. Because I think you're starting to see something from Lars Nootbaar. I think you're starting to see significant signs of life from Alec Burleson. I don't believe that Brendan Donovan will just be a 220 hitter for the entirety of the season. So for those guys, the lefty bats, Carpenter's shown you a little bit. It's not been great, but he's shown you a little bit of something here and there. If those guys get going offensively, it does help to boost your production. Now, you need the big guys to get going as well. That's ultimately what it's going to come down to with Goldie and Arenado. But they've had such little production from their left-handed bats so far this year that if those guys start to get going a bit, it will be a significant boost to the offense, and they need that in a desperate way. So if there's a reason for optimism for me, it would be some of those lefty bats that we were all excited about coming into the season.
Boy, it's interesting because, I don't feel that great about some of the lefty bats. I don't feel much better about Lars Nootbaar.
I think he's been better lately.
I think he's been fine, but it's not enough for me to, even feel opportunistic that he's going to turn it around right just yet.
Couple homers, 350 OBP this month. He's looking more like Lars Nootbaar.
You know what? He was really good on that road trip. I kind of discredited what he did with a 840 OPS.
Gorman's getting on base again. He's taking his walks. He looks a little bit better at the plate. Now, strikeouts are still there. Those are going to always be the case. He has not been hitting for power. He's got to start doing so. And if he does, I think we'll like what we see there as well.
So mine isn't with the left-handed bats, and it does come down to just one player because we've seen him carry the Cardinals before. To me, it's Paul Goldschmidt. I think Goldie actually looks better. He has a 5-game hitting streak currently, and he had an 0 for 4 in that opener at Milwaukee, but then he went 1 for 5, 2 for 5, 1 for 4, 2 for 5, 1 for 4. And he had 2 home runs on the road trip. And though you'd like to see a little bit higher of an OPS, his on base is still down right now at 310 during that road trip, but a 792 OPS. Maybe that is the beginning of Paul Goldschmidt starting to kind of figure things out. Look, I'm skeptical, but we're operating under our opportunistic side today. It is a Friday.
Is that what you're going for there?
Whatever. I don't believe in any of it. I don't believe in any of it. I'm trying my best here. But I would say it's Paul Goldschmidt because he looks a little better. He looks better at the plate. And if Paul Goldschmidt can figure it out and go through one of those hot Paul Goldschmidt streaks where it is a 2-week stretch where you're like, hot damn, how do you get that guy out? Then he can carry the Cardinals. He can carry them through this stretch that we just talked about 30 minutes ago about this 9-game homestand where they're going up against some really good pitching. If Paul Goldschmidt gets locked in and goes through a hot streak, he can be the reason they could single-handedly finish above 500 in this 9-game home stretch against Boston, Baltimore, and the Chicago Cubs.
This is an interesting text. This comes from Pete.
Pete.
314-399-9646. Says, guys, there's nothing on the field that suggests that we're going to make the playoffs. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
On the other side, we do have good talent. We know they can compete in the division and ultimately win it. This division's terrible. We're way better than this. You guys call it way too fast. There's still time. There's a legit amount of talent on this team, unlike there is on somebody like the Angels. This isn't blind faith in the Cardinals. This is just what it is. I can't make you see it, but it is there. I do think the Cardinals are better than this. It's why I've been so confused by their start to the season. If their pitching had just come in and old pitchers were bad, that would make sense to me. I could see how, Lynn just doesn't have it anymore. Michaelis doesn't have it anymore. Kyle Gibson ends up being below league average instead of right at league average. All of that makes sense. Hey, some of their flyers on the bullpen, like Fernandez was no good. O'Brien gets hurt. Keenan Middleton doesn't work out. Helsley goes through a little bit of a weird downward trajectory. Liberatore is overextended, and JoJo isn't the same guy that he was last year. I could see all of that happen. That would have made sense to me. Would have been a little surprising that all of it failed, but I could have seen how you got there. For this offense to be among the 5 worst in Major League Baseball is genuinely shocking to me. I don't understand it, and I don't believe that it will be that way all season long. But we're a quarter of the way through the season now. And at a certain point, the sample size is great enough that I can't just ignore that. I can't ignore what I've seen with my eyes and what we're seeing with the numbers for guys like Arenado and Goldie. So I want to be optimistic. You guys know that. I have tried like hell to remain optimistic about the Cardinals. And if they go out there and on this homestand, they go like 8-1, it's going to be hard for me not to get back on the bandwagon. I'm not going to lie to you. But I have to believe in what I'm seeing with my eyes right now. I have to believe in what we're seeing from the numbers. And so I respect that somebody still has that kind of faith, Pete. But that's all it is right now. It's just blind faith. There's nothing more that would lead you to that kind of belief because I don't think that they're the best team in this division, even by talent right now. It's hard for me to say that you are a more talented roster than the Cubs or the Brewers. I wouldn't have said this coming into the season. I did think they were. But right now, I'm not sure that's true.
Yeah, and I think to your point about it being a month and a half into the season at this point, I have to operate of this is who Brendan Donovan is going to be this season. I don't believe he's going to forever be now a 220 hitter in his career, but we've seen it. Baseball is a really hard sport, and it's really hard to hit pitching nowadays. There are even great players that have down seasons, and this just might be one of them for Brendan Donovan. And it's not like to me that I'm seeing, again, I undersold what Newport was. He was really good on this road trip, and I didn't.
Yeah, bro.
My bad. I missed that one. But a lot of these guys, I'm not seeing signs of improvement. Like, I do think Goldie's swing looks better. Arenado looks more lost than I think ever so far this season. Burleson looks good, but now I'm not sure I'm seeing the Brendan Donovan of old that's taking his walks and has the good batter's eye. He almost feels like he's pressing. Same for Nolan Gorman. I know he's drawing walks, but he's not here to walk. He's here to slug the damn baseball. So I love the optimism, Pete. I really do. I need a little bit more of that in my life. But now that we're a month and a half into the season, I have to start operating on the assumption of this is what Brendan Donovan's going to be this season and all those guys.
Sorry, a couple of texts to get to before we get out of here. Hey, when you look at when you look past, the lack of offensive production, the inconsistent pitching, the severely out of touch front office, the coaching that isn't developing rookies, the coaching ineptitude generally, we do have a good foundation, I think. Crap, I actually just depressed myself. There's one. Another one. I'm optimistic for the sole fact that I need to hear a train sounder on the show open, and I need to hear BK hop back on the air right afterwards saying, choo-choo.
No, you don't want that.
I think I would.
No.
8-1? If they get back to 500 after this homestand, 8-1 would get you back to 500. That's what it would take. That's the bare minimum.
Hell, you'd probably be a playoff team.
If they do that, I feel like we've all got to jump on board, or at least be pretty close to doing so. An 8-1 stretch. At this point, I'm not sure that this team's capable of an 8-1 stretch.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think they could.
Especially given the opponents that you're going up against here. If you go play well enough to go 8-1 against Boston, Baltimore, and Chicago, I think we're all going to feel pretty frisky.
This would be where I would differ just a little bit. Is how do they do it?
I don't care.
What? There's some things that are sustainable and some things that aren't. Like, if their pitching is great in this stretch and the offense is, like, still not hitting and Ollie's going, look at us go. We were 1 for 13 with runners in scoring position. We won a baseball game 2-1. Ignore the fact that they walked in those 2 runs. I'm not going to buy into that. Now, if their offense plays well and the pitching is fine, or the offense slugs and they win a bunch of games and the pitching kind of scuffles a little bit, I can buy back into that a little bit, because I think right now where the offense is, it's why I'm having a tough time coming up with all these happy sunshine and lollipop moments for you in this segment.
Somebody in the text line said, back to 500. Guys, when were they 500? They were 9-9. Get out of here. They actually had looking back on it, they had a pretty decent start to the season. You win 2 out of 3 against San Diego. You get a win in LA. You didn't get swept there. You win 2 out of 3 against Miami. You were super competitive in that series against Philly. They started out the season okay. It's everything that's happened since then that's been the problem.
I think my favorite text is the one from the 314, because this definitely came from a Cardinals front office personnel person. We are a second half team.
Yeah, sure. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into one's got to go. You give us 4 different options. We'll tell you which one's got to go. But next, T-Bone's got a thought on how long the Cardinals should wait before they decide to make a move in announcing who their next president of baseball operations is, even if they don't fire John Mozeliak when they announce that. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
I mean, I don't want to sit up here today on January 13th and retire, but I think having a succession plan and uncoupling some of the things that I've been involved in at such a high level, reasonably to think that having a different voice at some point would make a lot of sense. And so as I think about where the organization is and where we need to go, Bill and I have had a lot of discussions on what we want to see that look like. And so, a lot of people are sort of jumping to conclusions with the Chaim hire, but I would say that at the very least, it strengthens our bench.
That was John Mozeliak at Cardinals winter warm-up about 4 months ago, talking about what his future looks like, what his timeline looks like in terms of his retirement, saying, I still plan to retire after the 2025 season. With Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. T-Bone, I am curious what it's going to look like over the next year and a half, though. What that stretch will mean, because Ken Rosenthal has been talking over the last week or so about, hey, they are going to make a change at the president of baseball operations level at some point in the next 18 months or so, whether it's by choice or by Mo deciding to call it a career. So he started talking about what that might look like. We've seen John Heyman now in an article yesterday write about what the next manager could look like here in St. Louis if they decide to go down that path. One thing that we have seen other teams do at times in the past is announce some kind of a succession plan prior to that person that's in charge deciding to walk away. This was always kind of the hush-hush known thing in Chicago. We knew Theo wasn't going to be long for that job. Yeah. He always goes like 7 years and says, that's it for me. It's as long as he's willing to stay in one place. And so he knew, hey, Jed Hoyer's my number 2 in charge. He will take over for me whenever I decide to go somewhere else or whenever I decide to call it quits here in Chicago. That's exactly what took place. T-Bone, do you think that's something the Cardinals should be doing, is announcing sooner rather than later who the replacement will be for John Mozeliak if he either decides to walk away or the Cardinals decide to make him walk away?
Yeah, I do. I think they need to name who the next POBO is going to be sooner rather than later. And the reason I say that is because I think you're at a point right now, because he has announced his retirement, and maybe I'm the only one who feels this way, I feel like the organization as a whole has 3 lame ducks currently. I think you have kind of ownership right now where you're kind of in a transition from Bill DeWitt Jr. to Bill DeWitt III. You've got Mo, who's announced his retirement, so you're in a transition. I think they probably know who's taken over already internally. They just haven't said it publicly. My guess is Chaim Bloom, who we've talked about.
Interesting.
And then the reason I mentioned the manager as a lame duck isn't based on the results on the field, is because if they do hire someone that was externally, and I'm still going to include Chaim Bloom in that because he was brought from outside the organization, it's not very often that you see that new person that takes over running an organization stick with the coach that was left behind. Typically, they either move on that offseason or at the first sign of trouble, they just bail ship and go get their guy that they want. So to me, the Cardinals organization currently is operating with 3 lame ducks. But the reason I think they need to name the next POBO sooner rather than later is because I think the next whoever's taking over for John Mozeliak needs to start making some of those decisions now. And that's because I don't want John Mozeliak, who's retiring in 2025, to be the guy that is steering the ship at this trade deadline, because he may be building the team in a different direction than whoever it is that is going to come in and take over. If it is Chaim Bloom, maybe he wants to do something differently. Maybe he says, instead of, I don't know if they would do this is speculation, instead of saying, hey, let's not look to trade Nolan Arenado's contract, I think we can still make this work with him. Let's keep Nolan Arenado. I think once you start to get into this lame duck mode of Mo is going to retire, that he starts operating a little bit differently potentially from what the next guy is, and it can potentially set back the next guy if some moves that were not what he was thinking and what he was planning. I almost think at this point, Mo needs to be more of a public figure and less of a decision maker behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying there. I just don't know that that has to happen now. I would say let's wait this thing out until the All-Star break. That'll get you to mid-July. You're not making any decisions. We know how this team operates. They're not going to make any big decisions before then. They're not going to make any big decisions until they get closer to the trade deadline. And as we approach that All-Star break, you can have a hard reset as an organization and say, okay, where are we at? And if you are 5-10 games below 500, 5-10 games back at a minimum in both the divisional race and in the wild card at that point, and this is not a playoff team. You just watch the games, you see the numbers, you see the playoff odds, whether you go to Fangraphs, Baseball Reference, whatever. You know this is not a playoff team. Then you make the call. And you say, either John Mozeliak has decided to step down, we're going our separate ways. We appreciate the last 17 years of Mo being the shepherd of this ship, but it is time for us to go with somebody new here. That's one option. Option two, Mo will remain in charge of baseball operations, but Michael Gersh, Flores, Bloom, whoever it ends up becoming, they're going to be taking over the day-to-day operations. Mo will be here. He will be the one that is ultimately making the calls, but this is the person that we will have take over eventually for John Mozeliak. And right now, they're going to have a stronger say in our organizational decisions than what they did over the last however long that person has been here, depending on who ends up taking charge. I think that's when you do it. I don't think you have to make that kind of a call prior to the All-Star break, because I don't think those significant decisions will be made before then. If you get to the All-Star break, though, and you're out of it, you got to make some tough calls at the deadline. That could include Paul Goldschmidt. That could include Nolan Arenado. Could include Sonny Gray. Could include some of the young players, trading them and deciding to shuffle the board a bit here. And I don't want somebody that's going to be gone in a year making those decisions. I want the guy that's going to be in charge making those kinds of calls. Yeah, and that's where I'm. And again, I'm not saying it necessarily has to happen like tomorrow they announce Chaim Bloom does it, but I think you're right about the All-Star break is when you need to know. And you also need to know by the All-Star break whether this is going south or it is going well still. I would still like the next POBO, if he is internal, to have some say in those decisions, because what are you trading at the All-Star break? Potential prospects, potential guys that, the Cardinals let get away every now and then. But you need to know by the All-Star break if the guy's internal, by the way, too. Sure. Because if not, you got to start searching. And I don't think in a year and a half you're going to suddenly learn if Michael Gersh or Randy Flores or Chaim Bloom is the guy. You probably already know. The only guy you probably don't know whether or not he can be POBO right now is Chaim Bloom. And even then, that's a tough argument to sell because, as we've talked about, he did it in Boston for 4 years or 5 years, however long he was there. So I think you have to decide whether the guy's internal by the All-Star break so he can help start making those decisions for how he wants to shape the organization when Mo does step down, whether that is at the end of the season or at the end of the contract. And you need to know if you have the guy internally. And if not, you got to start searching for that guy so you can get him in sooner so you can start making this. Because not a lot of organizations get to the point where the guy that's in charge retire. I can't name a lot of those situations that have happened in the last decade outside of the Nashville Predators. That's the only one that I can think of. And think of what happened when Trotz came in there. He got rid of some of their stars and said, we've got to build a better culture because this was not good when what I took over was not what it should have been. He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You give us 4 different options. We'll tell you which one's got to go here on BK and Ferrario.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. An off day for the Cardinals. Yesterday, they're back in action today at Busch Stadium to open a series against the Red Sox. It'll be Kyle Gibson on the mound tonight for the Cardinals. 7:15 will be first pitch from Busch. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we'll have some NHL playoff hockey for you. Bruins and Panthers Game 6. The Panthers can eliminate the Bruins and move on to take on the Rangers in the Eastern Conference Final with a win tonight. All that coverage starting at 5:30 here on 101 ESPN. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario. Time now for One's Gotta Go. We offer up the talking points, and you get to pick which one's gotta go on 101 ESPN.
Count that big pen.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for One's Gotta Go. You give us 4 different options. We'll tell you which one's gotta go here on BK and Ferrario. One of these is very apt, given what just took place during the break here on the show. One's Gotta Go Spam Edition. Direct mail, emails, phone calls, or commercial/advertisements. I'm guessing that's pop-ups that are taking place on the internet. So I just got a call. I will just say my television provider has called me 10 times over the course of the last few days. And last time they did this, it was to tell me, hey, we're going to offer you HBO for free for a month. And I was like, all right, fine. I appreciate that. Please do not start charging me after that month. Otherwise, I do not want that on my account. They said, no, we're going to take it off. They did. We're good to go. So today they called again, 10 times the last few days. Like, hey, blah, 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 what's going on? And they said, hey, we're going to give you stars. We're going to give you stars on as a part of your package. And then he went through this long diatribe and thanked me for my
being a loyal customer.
Yeah, being loyal to them. I was like, all right, great. I appreciate it. And this is of no charge, right? He's like, no, $10.99 a month.
We don't enjoy you. We don't find you that loyal.
I said, please do not put that on my account. I have to go. I have no more time. So my answer would be phone calls. They are so unbelievably annoying. Please do not call me with your spam. I don't need to hear it. Email me all you want. I've got thousands of emails, 63,000 of them, in fact, that are all promos. I don't care about the emails. That's fine. I can delete them later. Don't call me, please. I don't want to see it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think phone calls are the worst. Like direct mail,
whatever. I can throw it away.
Yeah, throw it away, recycle it, whatever. Email, you can either ignore it or delete it. Ancillary commercials that pop up on YouTube, I just know that's a part of it. So, that doesn't bother me at this point anymore. Man, when you call me and I'm sitting down and when I feel my watch go off or I hear the phone ring, I assume it's something important, and when I look and it is a spam call, I get so frustrated. That's the one that has to go for me.
See, I don't like the spam calls, but they don't bother me all that much just because I don't really entertain them. Like BK, with that call that you just had, I would have hung up in 10 seconds. I would have been like, I'm not interested.
I just didn't want him to call anymore. I wanted this to be the last time they called, and that's the only reason.
I'm not lying. I would block their number. I don't even care if it's helpful.
They use different
email
numbers.
Me.
That's the worst part.
True.
They've got multiple different numbers that are one number apart.
Every time I get a spam call, I block it. Sure. So I just block as many as possible, and eventually they stop because I feel like they come in waves. I won't get one for a few months, but then all of a sudden I'll get 10 within a week, and it's just what is going on?
Somebody on the text line said, imagine running a small business and you have to answer the phone. It's brutal. I feel for anybody that has that job.
I could never do that.
I genuinely feel for you. All right, let's get to more of these. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. One's got to go alcohol edition. Beer, wine, cocktails, or hard liquors. This could be whiskey, vodka, whatever you prefer in terms of the hard liquor. T-Bone?
This is easy for me. I hate wine. I really do. I've yet to find a wine that I like. And look, you're going to say, well, just keep trying. Maybe you haven't had a good wine or you haven't had a good... Guys, I've tried them all. I have not found a wine that I like. It is the one that's got to go. I cannot drink wine.
I'm not really a beer guy. It's it's heavy on my stomach. It doesn't really get me places.
Gotcha.
To be frank, like
I hear you.
I go with the liquor or the cocktails. To be honest, wine gives me heartburn, but I'll take the beer here to go.
So I would say of the four, wine is the one that I drink the least amount of. I do like a good cocktail, and I'll pour myself a good whiskey occasionally. Love beer. So wine would be fourth on this list. Now, it's still something that I enjoy. I've found myself to become a big fan of reds, specifically from Oregon. But that would be fourth on my list. That one's the one that's got to go. All right, one's got to go. Barbecue side dish edition, T-Bone.
Okay.
I know Grant has weird food taste, so this will be interesting. Potato salad,
barbecue place.
Potato salad, barbecue beans, grilled corn on the cob, or coleslaw. Which one's got to go?
I like one of these.
Really?
Yes.
To be fair, I only like one too. I could do baked beans, so they'll stick around. It's down to coleslaw and not corn on the cob. What was the other one? Coleslaw.
Potato salad.
Potato salad. I'm gonna say get rid of potato salad.
I hate potato salad.
It doesn't look right, you know? Like it. I'm out. It just
You've got
looks
a point.
weird. I'm judging a book by its cover, and I get that. I'm out. It doesn't look tasty at all.
Have you ever had
Coleslaw, I
potato
could try.
salad before?
No,
Really?
the look terrifies me, man.
Oh, I'm not a big
Goopy glump? No thanks.
It does nothing for me. I do not enjoy potato salad, so that's the one that's got to go for me.
See, my opinion really doesn't matter here because I'm slightly picky with these things.
Slightly?
The only thing I would eat was the corn on the cob. I don't like the smell of baked beans though, so I would get rid of. No, I hate
Really?
the smell.
I think baked beans smell good. I'm just not a fan.
It's
to eat
disgusting.
Do you
to
not
me.
like barbecue sauce?
I hate barbecue sauce.
that explains it.
I absolutely my dad was grilling one day and I was holding the plate while he was putting the food on there and I wanted to throw up because of the smell.
All right. One's got to go rec sports edition. Softball, pickleball, beach volleyball, or indoor soccer. Softball, pickleball, beach volleyball, or indoor soccer. Which one's got to go, T-Bone?
Indoor soccer is super fun. Pickleball's fun. I would go beach volleyball just because it hurts.
That's number one on the list.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I never got into
It's also the
playing beach
easiest to
volleyball.
have the most number of people that are just okay to play it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, volleyball's the best for me
It's
too.
a low bar to
Yeah,
entry.
I really like
wow.
volleyball.
I never could get into playing rec volleyball and stuff like that.
Oh, it's fun, man.
I don't know, maybe, but I'm a wimp. You know, I talk a tough game. I'm not that tough. Hitting a volleyball hurts.
I would say indoor soccer is the one that's got to go, and the reason why is because it's just I like running. You guys know that. Too much running involved. All these others, you could play.
You've been watching real soccer players, right? They walk a lot. You could walk a lot while playing indoor soccer.
Sure, but there's too much activity. Softball doesn't require a whole lot of physical exertion. Beach volleyball, you're standing around the vast majority of the time and eventually going like this or like this. There's not a whole lot going on there. Pickleball, obviously, there's more exertion in that, but
if you do doubles, it's not as bad.
Yeah, I think indoor soccer, a little too much in terms of
That's my favorite.
the physical exertion taking place.
I think I'm with you, but I think if I was playing indoor soccer, I'd be the goalie. So
And if you're going and playing an actual rec sport, you're really getting involved, you've got a team, sure, indoor soccer could be a lot of fun. You're just getting a group of people together to go drink for a day and hang out and go play something. The last thing on that list for me would be indoor soccer.
If we said there was drinking involved, yeah, this would have been last, because trust me, I ran a beer mile.
All right, last thing up here. One's got to go Cardinals Young Gun Edition. Gorman, Wynn, Walker, Liberatore. It's easy for me. I'm going Libby.
Yeah, sorry, Libby. You're a bullpen arm, and the Cardinals don't know that yet still, so I would say Matthew Liberatore. The other three, I think, can become stars or good players.
I'd be with you. He's had probably the most opportunity that hasn't proved anything, so I would go with him.
Alongside Grant Francis and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll finish up the show today with the Rewind coming up next here on 101 ESPN. All right, for Tanner and Grant, I'm BK here on BK and Ferrario. If you've missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
If you missed any of our shows from the week, you can find those over on YouTube, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. The studio cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. Cardinals back in action tonight. They've got a 3-game set coming up against the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox come in with the best starting rotation ERA in baseball. Red Sox, then Baltimore, then Chicago. 9-game homestand coming up starting tonight. By the way, they do still have those tickets, I believe. The first beer Friday starting tonight against the Boston Red Sox. The first beer is on the Cardinals. Check those out at cardinals.com/promotions. T-Bone. How many games in this 3-game series will the Cardinals come away with a victory in?
I think 1. I think they will drop 2 or 3 to Boston because their pitching's been so good. They don't really have a weak link. It's why they're number 1 in baseball with their starting rotation. And I think they're top 10, if I remember correctly, with their bullpen as well coming into the series. Oh, top 5, 4th. Great. I think you're still going to see the Cardinals. Yeah, but I still think you're going to see the Cardinals offense scuffle. I think it's going to look a little better because I think there were some positive trends from the LA series. Like Goldschmidt looks better, Nootbaar looked better, even Donovan's numbers. He's not hitting for a ton of power, but his on base is starting to rise again. So maybe you see them look competitive. Maybe they squeak out 2, but I'm going to go on the less optimistic side, and I'm going to say they only win 1.
I think they will win 1 as well. 1 out of 3. I think they end up winning tonight. I think this is the game that they get. By the way, don't forget, on Sunday they play at 12 o'clock. It is a very early start because they are going to be on Roku, so don't go to Bally Sports Midwest. Is it on Bally Sports?
No.
Okay, don't go to Bally Sports Midwest. You got to find it on Roku. So Sunday, as you're gathering up the family, you guys are all getting together, hanging out. You turn on the Cardinals game on Bally Sports Midwest. Not an option. It will be on Roku on Sunday at noon. You got Michaelis tomorrow and then Liberator on Sunday. Maybe?
TBD?
Who do you think ends up starting for them on Sunday? Do you think they go Libby or do you think they go someone else?
I think it's still going to be Liberator. I think they're trying to keep this hush-hush so they feel like they have a competitive advantage of, are you going to see Libby out of the bullpen? No, I think they're going to start him. They don't seem to want to call up Sam Robersay. I don't really know why, because I think the results show you that you should at least give him a shot. And if it failed in one start, then you can send him right back down to work on things. But I think they're going to go with Matthew Liberator.
I think they will go with Libby, and I think this will be the last one that he gets. I think after that, they will say, we got to go with something different.
I like the way you think, but I'm not sure that's going to happen.
I really hope that is the way that they decide to go. Paul Skeens on the mound today for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He has made it through 2 innings, and after my big rant yesterday about how we don't focus enough on results, we look too much at the process, his results are spectacular. He has thrown 2 innings. He has recorded 6 outs. All 6 of them have come via strikeouts. The first 6 batters that he has faced have all gone down on strikeouts so far today. Pirates up 2-0 against the Chicago Cubs in that one. For Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Cardinals 3 games this weekend against the Boston Red Sox. I've got them winning 1. T-Bone's got them winning 1. Grant, how many do you have them winning over the weekend?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you guys. I think they'll win 1. I honestly think they'll probably win 1 in each of these series, and that'll be about it.
3-6. Going to be a lot of fun. So
nice.
We'll break that down for you guys on Monday at 11 a.m. We got Mark DeRosa next week? Maybe? Possibly?
Shrug emoji.
Fingers crossed on that one. We will have Katie Woo on Monday. The Fast Lane's got you guys covered from 2 to 6 right here on 101 ESPN.